The House will come to order. Please join Representative Lindsay in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning, members. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shi will please call the roll.
Representatives Mobile, Bacon is excused. Baisley, Benavides is excused. Burnett, Bird, Bockenfeld, Basenecker, Bradfield, Caraveo, Carver, Catlin, Cutter, Doherty, Duran, Esgar, Exum,
Morning, sir.
Froelich, Geithner, Gonzalez Gutierrez, Gray, Hanks, Herod, Holtorf, Hooten is excused. Judah, Kennedy, Kipp, Larson, Lindsay, Lontine, Luck, Lynch, McCluskey, McCormick, McKean, McLaughlin, Michelson, Janae, Mullica, Neville, Ortiz is excused. Pelton. We see Pelton. Oh. Pico. Ransom is okay. Rich. Here. Oh, whoops. Ricks is excused. Roberts. Sandridge. Sirota. Snyder. Soper.
Here.
Sullivan. Tipper. Titone is excused. Valdez A.
Here.
Valdez D.
Here.
Van Beber. Van Winkle.
Here.
Weissman. Williams.
Here.
Woodrow. Woog. Young. Mr. Speaker.
With 60 present and 5 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Lindsay.
Mr. Speaker, I move the Journal of Thursday, March 3rd, 2022 be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Thank you, members. You have heard the motion. Again, I really don't know if it's debatable, but Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, down here on the end of the desk is our journal clerk, who is like the most amazing person who, Carl goes through this. This is a vote for Carl.
Carl is the best. Should we?
What's that? Say what? What is the anniversary? He's just saying he's good. No. This is a vote for Carl. This is a vote for Carl.
He's confused.
Vote. I think what the minority leader was saying was, this is for Carl. Should I call the motion or should we keep going? Should we keep going? All right. The question before us is the adoption of the journal as approved by the chief clerk. Thank you, Carl, for all your service. All those in favor say aye.
Aye!
All those opposed, no. Remember, it was for Carl. The ayes have it. The motion is approved. Announcements and introductions. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple nonprofit leaders who are here in the chamber today. Marianne and Wanda, they've worked in rural Colorado. They've been best of friends since their high school days, and they work together both as members of the 4-H Club and active in the Future Farmers of America. So, welcome. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Representative Bradfield, Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Representatives, I would like to draw your attention to the gallery. Today we have the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments is visiting to touch base with their regional delegation.
It's all part of the game.
And to provide information directly from the leadership of the Pikes Peak region. 16 member governments are from 3 different counties, El Paso, Teller, and Park, and they represent almost 800,000 citizens. They work on areas of aging, transportation, environment, air and water, and all the planning that they can do around the military installations. Thank you. Please give them a hearty welcome.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I'll just call out some of the members from PPACG, the Pikes Peak Area Council of Government, that we have with us this morning. We have Sharon Thompson, the mayor of Fountain. We have Stan Vanderwerth from El Paso County Board of County Commissioners. Dave Donaldson from Colorado Springs City Council. We have Nancy Hingham from Colorado Springs City Council as well. Eric Stone, Teller County Board of County Commissioners. Andrew Gunning, Executive Director of PPACG, and I think that's it, right? Did I miss?
Teller County.
I'm sorry, and Calhan. I'm sorry, we have Calhan.
Robert Zualaga from Teller.
Robert Zualaga from Teller.
Woodland Park.
All right.
Woodland Park.
Thank you so much, guys. Glad to have you here.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I come at this from a different perspective. I believe Representative Pico and I are past chairs of the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. Currently, Commissioner Stan Vanderwerth, I believe, is chairing that. It's a really effective organization. Covers everybody from Little Calhan out on the east all the way up to Woodland Park in Teller County. So welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your service. And we hope you have a great day at the Capitol. Further announcements and introductions. Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the approval of the majority and the minority leader, I am excused for Monday, March 7th. Thank you.
So approved. Representative Will. Members, please direct your attention to the will.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
I'm going to serve with you too, Representative Will.
I want to talk about a real tragedy that happened yesterday in the town of Parachute in my district, Garfield County, District 16. A young girl, 11 years old, running for the school bus, late, tripped and fell under the bus. So I would... I mean, words can't describe. I mean, you think of the little girl, that her parents, her friends, the kids on the school bus, the driver, the school, all the first responders there. It's a 11-year-old child. So my heart just aches. That's all I can say. And I would like to ask for a moment of silence for the little girl from Parachute.
Moment of silence is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chamber, and hug your little ones every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wall. Further announcements and introductions. Seeing none, the next order of business is third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Shi will please read the title to House Bill 1228.
House Bill 1228 by Representatives Roberts and Bockenfeld, also Senator Quorum, concerning the continuation of the regulation of pre-need funeral contracts and in connection therewith implementing the recommendations contained in 2021 Sunset Report to the Department of Regulatory Agencies.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1228 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1228 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shi will please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. For those participating online, Representative Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Williams votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Van Winkle votes no. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Titone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Titone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. With 57 aye votes, 7 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1228 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shi will please read the title to House Bill 1237.
House Bill 1237 by Representatives Roberts and Will, also Senator Rankin and Donovan, concerning county court judges in western Colorado.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1237 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1237 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shi will please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Williams votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Van Winkle votes yes. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hold on, Valdez's. We'll go A first. Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Titone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Titone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1237 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shi will please read the title of Senate Bill 91.
Senate Bill 91 by Senators Buckner and Cook, also Representatives Harrod and Van Winkle, concerning making non-substantive changes to language and statutory provisions relating to the review of executive agency rules and in connection therewith, repealing obsolete and redundant statutory provisions and conforming other statutory provisions to modern drafting practices.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 91 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 91 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shi will please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Williams votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Van Winkle votes yes. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 91 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1229.
House Bill 1229 by Representatives Weissman and Soper, also Senators Gardner and Gonzalez, concerning adopting cleanup provisions to Senate Bill 21271, which enacted the 2021 recommendations of the Colorado Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1229 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1229 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Williams votes no. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Van Winkle votes no. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. 44 aye votes, 20 no votes, and 1 excuse. House Bill 1229 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1257.
House Bill 1257 by Representatives Weissman and Soper, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning the adoption of the 2022 recommendations of the Colorado Criminal Juvenile Justice Commission regarding sentencing provisions for offenses and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1257 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1257 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Williams votes no. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Van Winkle votes no. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Rich votes no. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 23 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1257 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1016.
House Bill 1016 by Representatives Carver and McLaughlin, also Senators Heisey and Fields, concerning a voluntary contribution designation benefiting the Feeding Colorado Fund that appears on the state individual income tax return forms and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1016 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1016 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Williams votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Van Winkle votes yes. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Please close the machine. 63 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 2 excused. House Bill 1016 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative D. Valdez, co-sponsor. Representative A. Valdez, co-sponsor. Tatone, Rich, Exum, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1208.
House Bill 1208 by Representatives Weissman and McKean, also Senator Lee, concerning changes to jail data collection requirements and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1208 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1208 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Williams votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Van Winkle votes yes. Representative Rich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Rich votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes. Representative Montine. Please close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 2 excused, House Bill 1208 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to proceed out of order for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 2.
Seeing no objection, we'll proceed out of order for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 2. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 2.
Senate Joint Resolution 2 by Senator Donovan, also Representatives McCormick and Catlin, concerning approval of water project revolving fund eligibility lists administered by the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority.
Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Joint Resolution 22002 and ask that it not be read at length.
I was hanging on that motion. I was hanging on it. Thank you, Representative McCormick. That is a proper motion. Would you like to speak, Representative McCormick, to the resolution?
Though I do, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do encourage you all to read the 18 pages of this resolution because I believe you will find perhaps in your very own town or your county that there is a water project that needs funding. And these projects, this is something that we do every year, needs to be passed every year to continue to fund these very important drinking water projects and to protect our water from pollution. This funding is 100% federal dollars. That's why there's no fiscal note attached. And I encourage an aye vote for the town of Larkspur and the town of Ordway and the town of Sugar City and many other. I'm not going to read it. So, thank you.
Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to be with you this morning.
It's an honor to be with you this morning, too, Representative Catlin.
Thank you. This is something that the House of Representatives and the Senate in the state of Colorado do on an annual basis to continue the funding out of the Drinking Water Revolving Fund to provide financial assistance to certain drinking water projects in the state. The fund is held and administered by the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority, which is authorized to issue bonds so that these projects can be created. These are the things that keep our communities healthy and safe. These projects are where we spend the money to make sure that the water that's in the houses, in the homes, and in the bottles of the people that we care about is pure and safe. These are the kind of things that government can and should be doing. This is one of those. It's too bad we have to do it on an annual basis, but I do appreciate the fact that we do it on an annual basis. This is something your community needs. This is something that my community needs. This is something the state of Colorado needs. Please vote yes.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Gray.
I think this is Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's about the fifth time out of 5 years, six, I don't know however many years I've been here that I've given the speech, but infrastructure is really expensive. You know, we care a lot about infrastructure, especially about water infrastructure, because if you do that wrong, folks get sick. And this program, which I've been working with for years before I came down to the State House, is incredibly important because it makes sure we have got clean water in places where there's not enough money around to actually pay for it, and the state can come in and help. And it's called a revolving fund, which means as communities pay money back in for the loans that they get out of the authority, then that money goes back to other communities. So as one community pays in because they got the project they needed, another community gets funding for the project that they needed. And a lot of these are in areas that just can't afford it as much. You might say it helps close the urban-rural divide, Representative Holtorf. But anyway, as I ask every year on that, do take a look at the list, because there's going to be some projects in your district where your community wouldn't have been able to afford it for a lot of folks, but this program helps fund it, and it's a great example of how we can work together all the way across the state to solve expensive problems by working together. So thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Joint Resolution 2? Seeing none, is there objection to a voice vote on Senate Joint Resolution 2? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Joint Resolution 2 is adopted. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors of SJR 22-002.
Seeing no objection, this morning's roll call will be added as co-sponsors of Senate Joint Resolution 2.
Thank you.
Mr. Shebel, please read committee reports.
Committee on Business Affairs and Labor, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bills 1200 and 1201 be postponed indefinitely. Committee on Education, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bills 1066, 1069, 1207 be postponed indefinitely. House Bill 1202 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 14 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Committee on Energy and Environment, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bill 1159 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bill 1109, 1118 as amended, 1126, 1143 as amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Committee on State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bills 1161 and House Concurrent Resolution 1004 be postponed indefinitely. House Bill 1266 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the following bills be listed as special orders at 9:32 a.m. today. House Bill 1266, House Bill 1018, House Bill 1082, House Bill 1095, Senate Bill 45, Senate Bill 59.
Seeing no objection, the bills listed by the Majority Leader today, Friday, March 4th at 9:32 will be made special orders. Representative Roberts. Seeing no objection, Representative Roberts will take the chair. The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee reports are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads.
Okay.
Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader, and the coat rule is relaxed.
Motion.
Mr. Shebo, please read the title of House Bill 1266.
House Bill 1266 by Representatives Tipper and Gray, also Senator Winter, concerning modifications to the state employee total compensation philosophy to provide flexibility to state employee total compensation practices.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1266.
To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, as you know, in the 2020 election, the voters of this state approved paid family and medical leave for workers all across the state. And in response to that, and based on its initiative, the administration has worked to try to lead by example and provide paid family and medical leave for state employees ahead of even when they'd be required. The Proposition 118 does include the state, so the state has to play by the same rules as private employers, but the state actually wants to get out ahead of that. Now, there's been a snag, and I'll let my fellow lawyer sponsor describe it because she was there the day it happened, where there was some questions about the legal authority for the state to be able to do that. And what this does is clean it up. The state wants to provide paid family and medical leave to its employees, and we want to make sure they have the legal tools to do that, and that's what this bill would do.
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was language in the existing statute that was construed as a ceiling when really it was meant to be a floor. So the amendment, the changes to the language that we made was to do just that, is to make it a floor to allow for the state to move forward with paid family leave. And with that, I ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1266? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1266. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1266 passes. Mr. Shebo, please read the title of House Bill 1018.
House Bill 1018 by Representative Kennedy, concerning a state-regulated utilities practices regarding a customer's ability to pay the customer's utility bill.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1018, and we'll move the committee reports in just a moment. I want to start by telling you what this bill is. House Bill 1018 is a bill about doing everything we can to help utility customers keep the heat on. It builds on work by Majority Leader Escar from a couple years ago to make sure we have really solid disconnection, reconnection policy for how utilities deal with their customers who have failed to pay a bill, and making sure that once they have paid that overdue bill, they get reconnected as soon as possible. With that, Mr. Chair, I move the committee reports from Finance and Energy and Environment.
To the Energy and Environment Committee report.
Mr. Chair, I believe Finance would be first.
Is that where you started?
No, Mr. Chair, we started in Energy and Environment and then went to Finance.
Finance first. Okay, sorry. To the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Finance Committee, we made one clarification to an exception to the same-day reconnection policy to accommodate a concern from the last of the four regulated utilities who had not yet moved to a neutral position on the bill. With this amendment, we did get the fourth of all four into a neutral position on the bill. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on the Finance Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Finance Committee report is adopted. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Energy and Environment Committee, we actually made considerable amendments to address a lot of concerns we heard throughout the stakeholding process, including making very clear the provisions about when and how you are supposed to make a same-day reconnection, as well as clarifying the kinds of communications we expect the utilities to make before they disconnect someone's power in the first place. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Energy and Environment Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the Energy and Environment Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Energy and Environment Committee report passes. To the bill, Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By improving communications and ensuring a fair disconnection reconnection policy, we can help get more people assistance paying their bills and keep the lights and heat on. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1018? Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to this bill. It is, while well-intentioned to get people
back on. The fact is utilities do not disconnect customers unless they completely do not cooperate in paying their bills. The cost of carrying someone is spread across everybody else. This is not a good way to do this thing. While I appreciate many of the amendments which try to soften this and make this thing work better, it is still not where it needs to be. One of the issues as well is the idea that you're going to make a separate arrangements for low-income people, different rates, and that, in addition, spreads costs over others. I urge a no vote.
Representative Hanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also in the Energy and Environment Committee, and I was a no on this. And the reason I was is because the testimony of the utility companies I thought was remarkably impressive as to how much work they actually do to work with customers to not disconnect. So given that testimony, I do understand what the bill sponsor is attempting to do, and I believe it's noble, but I believe there's already processes in place by the utility companies to keep people's power on. So I too am a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you too, Representative Will.
I also heard this bill in committee, and I was a no vote, and would continue to be, as I think it puts a lot of undue pressure on our utility companies, and especially in rural Colorado, with some of the disconnect with the notices, as well as the reconnect, and it just puts burdens on those utility companies in law and statute, and I don't think it's all the utility companies that I'm aware of give ample notice of disconnect. So I just don't see the necessity of this bill. I certainly don't see it for rural Colorado utility companies. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, esteemed colleagues. I also want to point something out about rural Colorado. In rural Colorado, our energy prices are going up. Our cost to survive, mind you, in many of my small towns, we're not thriving. We're surviving. Our cost to survive in rural Colorado is now going up. Energy policy is not helping us. Cost of electricity in every home is now going up. 5, 10, 20, 30%. We don't know where that's going to end up. But we know it's going up, and we feel it around the kitchen tables every day when we're trying to pay our bills. For small business, in my agricultural operation, it takes a lot of energy. And my energy bills are going on. Not at home, not only in my home, but in our cattle feeding operation. Now, I will tell you, the bill sponsors have the best of intentions. They want to help the people that can't pay. But guess what? When you raise the cost of energy, there will be more people that can't pay. Make no mistake about it. How do we fix that problem? Does this bill even help? I have strong doubts. Anything that is going to raise the cost of living in this state, anything that's going to make it more expensive for energy, which we need energy to run the economy, hurts Colorado, hurts Colorado small business. Well, I'll tell you what, it hurts all business. But it really hurts rural Colorado. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the concerns of my colleague from the southeastern plains of Colorado, and I want to make 2 points to respond. One, the bulk of rural Colorado is not actually impacted by this bill. This bill applies to the 4 investor-owned utilities, Xcel, Black Hills, CNG, and Atmos. They do have some rural territory, but I'm not thinking it's mostly in your district, Representative. Secondly, I appreciate the concern about cost. That's another reason why this bill is so important. Do you know that between the utility assistance programs in Colorado with LEAP and Energy Outreach Colorado, only 15% of the eligible people are actually enrolled in these programs? This bill is going to help people who are struggling to pay their bills get that assistance that they're already eligible for. So again, I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thanks you so much, Mr. Chair. This affects investor-owned utilities. And in some ways you think, okay, so these are investor-owned utilities, they can afford to do this. But some of us have real experience with what this looks like in not just a rural environment, but an urban and suburban environment. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because to go out and require the kind of timely service, the timely reconnection this bill asks for, is not in the realm of reality for people who have an entire host of other things they need to do that day. And actually, it's kind of what I'd like everybody to think about is if you're going to require something, you have to require it in a way that makes sense. And this doesn't make sense. If I have somebody who's already got his entire day filled with the things that they've got to do, to meet the demands of this bill, I now need to hire someone else. Hiring someone else pushes up the cost of doing business. If you push up the cost of doing business, then what you're going to have to do is raise rates. I think we need to be very careful when we tell people what they're going to go do, how they're going to go do it. So I'm opposed to this bill. I would be interested in seeing what the conversation looks like for how you achieve the goal you want without demanding.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this bill's really, I think trying to tie up some loose ends from previous bills. Let me tell you a little bit about why we're even talking about these disconnections. It's actually one of the reasons I ran for office back in 2013 is when I decided to run for office. When we talk about these low-income folks who cannot pay their utilities, it's not because they're living a lap of luxury. Utility rates have completely risen so much in the past few years. The investor-owned utility company that provides electricity in my area actually got a 26% increase in a matter of 4 years before I ran for office. That's what the PUC approved for them. What does that mean for low-income folks? Low-income folks were paying almost 30 to 40% of their monthly income to a utility company just to have either heat or some air conditioning on in Pueblo where you need it, where the temperature rises to above 100 degrees for most of the summer. The other folks that we're talking about are folks that live on oxygen. Live on oxygen. I can't tell you about the night, it was about 9:30 in the evening, once I was actually sworn in, serving in this body, I had a constituent call me, bawling his eyes out because his electricity got shut off. He was on oxygen. He was calling me to see what I could do to get his oxygen turned back on that night. He was calling me from his cell phone in his car because his phone charger couldn't charge his phone anymore. He didn't know what he was going to do. All I could offer him was to call him an ambulance. That's what we're talking about. We're just trying to say, make sure that when there's disconnects happen, you work with those customers to figure out ways to make sure they can not only pay their bill, get the service reconnected, but to be conscientious when these disconnects happen. That's why these bills are so important. This isn't about trying to stick it to a corporation. This isn't about trying to let people get off without paying their bills. This is simply about taking time to pause and really listen to your customer base and see what it is that they actually need, because we don't get a choice. This isn't a free market. We don't get to pick who our utilities are. Depends on where you live. That's what this bill's trying to reinforce, and I appreciate the bill sponsor for bringing it forward. That's the issue at hand. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to rise and respond to some of that. Yeah, I ran for office in 2013 also, but I spent the next 8 years running a utility company, and we worked on these issues. Our rates were keyed to what we could control. PUC gave us authority to do that, so I've been setting rates, I've been setting policy, and we've been managing a utility company. To one of the comments made that this only applies to investor utilities. True, it does not apply to my municipal utility. But the
economics are the same, the processes are the same, the impacts are the same. It takes a long time before any utility kicks a customer off. No utility wants to do that. They have to cover the costs of serving the customers. Rates are rising. Well, why are the rates rising? It's because of bad policies that are in place that are driving utility costs up. It is the policies enacted in this chamber, under this dome, and as well as in Washington, D.C. If you want lower rates, if you want fewer disconnects, then take the shackles off the companies that are providing the utilities. That's how you fix the problem that you want. No utility company wants to kick someone off, and every utility company wants to reconnect as soon as possible. You don't need this bill. This is a bad bill as structured. I appreciate the intent. I want to compliment the bill sponsors for many of the amendments, which make it a little bit better, but it is still not one that we need. And I will also make the point that it was said that this only applies to investor utilities, doesn't apply to rural. It absolutely does, because those investor utilities do serve the rural. Thank you.
Representative Woog.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in case someone didn't hear, it got a little loud in here. My representative colleague from down south made a great point, folks. We're talking about trying to help those that may be in more of need, that maybe don't have the incomes that everyone has. But our energy policies and legislation that come out of here are hurting the whole state. It's hurting everyone. So let's look at the regulation that we have put on industry that is creating higher costs for all of us, and not just look at this bill, which is trying to fix a problem that has been created right here. So it's sad that no one's listening, but I think we really need to look at the big picture and open the door to allow the energy industry to thrive here in Colorado. Thank you.
Representative Hanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As many of you may know, in addition to my military career, I put in some time fracking in the oil fields of North Dakota. When we talk about oil and energy policy, we have a misshapen policy, misshapen energy policy in this state. Let me give you an example from my travels around the state just this last week. I had the opportunity to be up in Moffett and Routt counties and talking with the citizens up there about their travails with the mining restrictions, limitations, the oil and gas restrictions, limitations. But here's the one that caught me the most. They have a coal plant up in their region that is going to shut down early as part of our so-called energy policy. I would call it mismanagement. So it's shutting down early, and they aren't just going to mothball it in place, they are going to dismantle it. And you'll never guess who put in the first bid for this coal plant. China. So, think about this. We have mismanagement of our energy policy. Our prices are skyrocketing here, and we are dismantling our power production. This is a disaster. No wonder prices are up. You know, I'll give a first person example. I'm not even at my own house that much, and my rates went up 3 times what they were the month before. So, I mean, we're in a bind here, and what we're doing on this bill isn't going to help in the long term. I think Representative Holtorf made a good point where he said that as rates go up, more people are going to be in this position to where they're going to be disconnected. We have to think about having a better energy policy so that the rates are cheaper for people on a monthly basis. Thank you.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to repeat, this bill is not going to raise costs for anyone. If anything, by helping people pay their bills, it is going to bring down costs for the rest of the system. So I appreciate the robust debate. A lot of it drifted well beyond the scope of what's in this bill itself. But this bill is very simple. It's about getting people reconnected to their power, helping people pay their bills, and keeping the heat on. Thank you.
Any further? Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am concerned about how quickly we need to reconnect people, particularly in whether it be tough weather or if you're a long ways away from the headquarters of the outfit that you buy your power from. Sometimes putting limitations on how quickly that needs to be done will probably force more confrontation between the power company and the consumer. But on the other side of what I want to talk about is it was mentioned early in this conversation that LEAP and some of these programs that the state of Colorado has to help people with their power bills, something was quoted, and I'm not sure, but about 37% of the people that could get it are not following through and getting it. 85? 85% of the people. So from my point of view, sitting out there in western Colorado thinking about what can we do, maybe this same amount of effort could be done to help the people that are in trouble paying for their power on a program that we already have, rather than trying to dictate something that may not be physically capable of, is to help these folks not get to the point where they need to be or get disconnected. I know that's not in this bill. I know that I'm speaking to something that's probably different than what we're trying to accomplish here. But I think in the same way we're doing a lot of things, we're trying to go to the source of the problem rather than just the reaction to the problem. Those programs were stood up to do this very thing. Evidently, the state or someone is failing to get the information to the people that could use it, would use it, and not only that, need it. I'd like to see some efforts put in to that program, bringing it to the front to where more people are thinking about it. The idea of turning people's electricity off or their gas is concerning to me. You know, I've got an older dad, and I don't know what that would do to him. He's not in danger of it, so don't get me wrong. But when you get to that age, something like that's pretty traumatic. So it seems to me that the programs that the state of Colorado have now need to be better advertised, better discussed, and opening up some of the people that could apply and would get the help. I think we need to spend more time with that. I'm going to be a no on this vote, for those very reasons. I'd like to see more effort put into helping people pay the bill than just figuring out how to get them turned on after it's off. Thank you.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Contrary to the assertions from my colleague from Montrose, that is what is in this bill. I direct your attention to the Energy Environment Committee report. This bill is attempting to get more help to these people. This is giving the utilities the option, to be clear. It's saying, if you don't want to do a same-day reconnection, then what you do need to do is communicate with them about how to enroll in these programs. It builds on work I did last year in House Bill 1105. We are doing that work. That is what this is all about, is getting people that work. We have funded outreach programs. We're asking the utilities to do better communication with their customers about their ability to sign up for these programs. That is what this bill is doing.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, every utility already puts a lot of that data out. We send out, how do you get on to low income assistance? We put that in every bill mailing that goes out. We put it in an email blast. We cover through every possible means. That is what every utility already does. The statement was made that this will not shift any cost to anybody else. Well, it will. right in the bill. It talks about income qualified utility customers. And while the commission shall take into account the potential impact on and cost shifting to utility customers other than income qualified utility customers, it doesn't ban it. Now let me give you a short lesson on rate setting, and I did rate setting for 8 years. You have a class. A residence is a class of customer. Businesses are a class of customer. They are the different types of rates that you set. Income qualification is not a class. And when you do that, when you set what your cost to service is, that's what you calculate. What does it cost a utility to provide that service? And that's how they have to set the rate. That's how they get the approval from PUC. That's how every utility, whether it's municipal, whether it's co-op, whether it's investor-owned, has to make that calculation and has to report that to the rate-setting authority. If one class group within a rate class gets a preferential treatment, that cost is shifted to everyone else. That's how rate making works. That is what is in this bill. I urge a no vote.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also rise in opposition to this bill, but I would like to focus on a procedural aspect as to why I rise in opposition. As my colleague from southeastern Colorado often points us to, we have this challenge to bridge the rural-urban divide. There's another divide that I think we need to reassert, which is the divide between the legislative branch and the executive branch. Too often in our bills, we give rulemaking authority to the executive branch. In essence, we give our job over to another branch of government. And this bill does that by saying, basically, that a rulemaking proceeding needs to be held that must address the following subjects. So we give these broad topics that they must address and figure out how this is to work. That's really our job. And the reason for that is because we're the ones that can be held accountable. The unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch have very little opportunity to be held accountable. And so I rise in opposition for that reason, and I hope that we can be cognizant of that as we develop our own bills, myself included, because I've noticed it in some drafts of my own, and make sure that we are reasserting that executive-legislative divide.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Esteemed colleagues, I have another concern, and this one really bothers me, as it should bother everyone in this chamber who has an elderly mother or an elderly father that lives on a fixed income. Older Coloradoans, will they be able to absorb the higher energy costs that are here now and are going to continue to rise because of bad energy policy that costs all classes of energy, but specifically electric energy, to rise 20, 30%, 40%. Now, we can't go back in time as we move forward without serious policy shifts in this state. But here's my concern. I'm going to read part of the bill now. I'm on page 5. I'm not going to read the whole bill. Don't get concerned. But I do want to point out something. On page 5, line 22 to 27. An income qualified utility customer means a utility customer who the Department of Human Services, created in section 26.1.105, the organization defined in section 40-8.7.103, paragraph 4, or the Colorado Energy Office, created in 24-38.5-101, has determined. So, if you are under those three statutes, a qualified, income qualified utility customer, you can take advantage of this. And I know we are in a react mode. So we create these laws as a reaction, a knee-jerk reaction to problems that we create right in this chamber and go right through the governor's office. Now, what's the real problem? And what are we going to do when our senior citizens who don't qualify under those three sections? Now, this is serious, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious. It's not okay when we have our elderly, senior citizens, older Coloradoans on fixed incomes who are right above that threshold. They don't get the benefit of this. Others will. And let me tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen. In rural Colorado, we don't want to put our hand out. We're not looking for this. We want to stand proud. We want to carry our own pail of water, and we want to be able to pay our energy bill without having to go to Daddy Warbucks and ask for something else. Now, that's the real problem I have, Colorado, and for my colleagues, I don't know why. We continue to try to put a Band-Aid on a wound. And this Band-Aid will not fix the problem for Colorado. The more I analyze this, the more I look at this, the more it troubles me. This way of governing, this way of creating solutions to problems that are much larger than this particular legislation, that can't fix the real problem, is troubling to me. I'll be a strong no against this. If Colorado, we want to solve problems, we better get to the source of the problem. I hope Colorado is listening today as your energy prices are going to continue to skyrocket and go up another 20, 30%. And you're going to have to get in the food line for these programs so we can feel good about what we do in this chamber.
Is there any further discussion on HB 1018? Representative Will.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I was in deep conversation with Rep. Lontine over there. So I just want to come up and say on this, I understand the intent with the sponsor of this bill, what they're trying to do, but I don't think it's a state government's role to tell utility companies how to operate their businesses or how to treat their customers. And I think these businesses should do this on their own and not have the additional red tape involved from state government and laws to deal with these customers. One thing that hasn't been talked about much is these gas utilities are typically natural gas, right? Well, I can tell you a huge part of rural Colorado is on propane. Most rural residents are on propane tanks out there. And I can tell you when your propane tank runs out, there's your shut-off. You better pay your bill and pay for your propane, or you're not going to heat your house. And so this bill doesn't even cover remotely the biggest part of rural Colorado that are on propane tanks. So I can tell you at my house, when I don't pay my bill, I don't have propane to cook, I don't have propane to heat my house. So you pay your bills. And I think we're getting a little too far into the weeds in this, so thank you.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1018? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1018. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. No. The ayes have it. Mr. Sheep, House Bill 1018 passes. Mr. Schiebel, please read the bill title of House Bill 1082.
House Bill 1082 by Representatives Hooten and Bacon concerning the enforcement of state housing laws by the Department of Law and in connection therewith establishing a fair housing unit within the Department of Law.
Representative Bacon.
I move House Bill 1082 and the Judiciary Committee report. Give me one second.
Madam Majority Leader.
Never mind. Can we stand in a brief recess?
The committee will stand in a brief recess. The committee will come back to order. Representative Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to the Judiciary Committee report. Members, in Judiciary, we added an amendment to the bill to be sure that we could add an additional space that the Attorney General could investigate when it comes to housing discrimination, and that is for those with criminal records beyond a certain point it's found in statute. We also added a legislative deck to be able to share the purpose of this section, the purpose of the section of the bill, which is to create a new housing unit of investigation for the Attorney General. And we also added in an amendment the scope and the investigatory powers of the AG's office. We ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The committee report passes. To the bill. Representative Hooten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, what this bill does is create a unit to enforce three housing laws that we enacted in the past 2 years. The mobile home dispute resolution process at DOLA, the Mobile Home Parks Act, the update for that act, and the Immigrant Tenants' Rights Act. And that is the sole purpose of the bill. And I think with that, we've got some other comments, which I'm happy to respond to.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in opposition to the bill for the following reasons. In current Colorado law, when we authorize the Colorado Attorney General to do investigations and enforcement action, we define the standards in statute on the scope of his authority and when he is authorized to act. So in current law, the Colorado Attorney General has the authority to investigate and take action when there is a pattern of unfair housing discrimination. And there are standards set out in that section defining, what is a pattern and that type of thing. Same thing with Medicaid fraud. Unfortunately, in this bill, it is a statement saying the AG has the authority to investigate and take action in the following, and then it just references previously passed statutes, but there is no description in statute on where that threshold is. So you are left with the situation, if they're enforcing against a violation of the Mobile Home Park Act, is that an individual dispute between a mobile home owner and the park? Is this the AG acting in cases where legal aid would normally act? Surely that is not what we intend our AG to do. Surely it is when there is a statewide interest and there is a pattern of violation. So this issue was raised in committee. And I know the AG's office is looking at this and is in discussion. I think the better practice would be to get that language, for this body to see that language as part of our legislative oversight, to pass a bill in this form with no guardrails at all, and a ledge deck provides no legal guardrails. That is just a statement of intent. It has no legally binding authority. Is not the way we should legislate, in my opinion. So with that, I would ask for a no vote on the bill as written. Would ask that we wait and consider the bill once we've seen the language the AG is working on to properly define when they will have enforcement authority. Again, not just individual complaints, but where there is a pattern. And then what remedies can the AG pursue? All of that needs to be defined in law. And so I ask for a no vote on the bill as it is currently.
Representative Hooton.
Thank you. Members, in committee, there was a question about whether or not this bill is expanding the authority of the Attorney General's office. That is a separate section of statute. It does not. It adds 1.5 FTE to the Department of Law. This is not an enormous expansion of the Department of Law. There was a question about whether or not the AG's office now is going to treat this law as a dispute resolution process at the Department of Law. It is not doing that. They are looking for patterns of behavior. There has been discussion for the past 2 weeks about an amendment. I haven't seen it yet. I have been very open to seeing language for an amendment that would improve the bill. Nothing has been forthcoming. So I believe that I would like to go forward. And if we can, if those concerned about the additional authority that this bill is giving the Attorney General, I believe that can be managed on the Senate side. But we have been on this bill now going on 3 weeks. And the language for the much talked about but not seen amendment, I think, can be addressed on the Senate side. Thank you. I urge a yes vote.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, respectfully to my colleague, the language of the bill and the testimony is specifically, the whole purpose of this bill is to add to the Attorney General's portfolio, add to their ability, legal authorization, to take action in these additional areas. That is the whole point of the bill. We are adding jurisdiction to the AG's office. And we are doing it, in my view, the wrong way. You cannot just have, well, I guess you can. I guess that's what's in front of us. To have one sentence saying the AG shall be able to investigate and enforce with regards to, and then you list out these past laws. We have never defined the AG's authority that way. If you do that, you open it up to them being able to act as a legal aid attorney in an individual case. We have never done that. Not with unfair housing discrimination, not with Medicaid, not with the other areas currently in statute. There is a statutory section that defines the threshold criteria. Usually it is when there is an issue of statewide concern and a pattern of violations. The ledge deck, which was initially offered up as the limiting language for how the AG acts, A ledge deck provides no legally binding effect on anybody. It's just our thinking behind the bill. And that is why it is so critically important for utilizing this very powerful authority that the AG has to bind it and define it in statute. And so with all respect to my colleagues, this bill really needs to be delayed until we see the language, we see the scope and how we're defining the AG's authority and when they can get involved and can take action from their powerful office, and I ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1082? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of 1082. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no, nay. The ayes have it. HB 1082 passes. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1095.
House Bill 1095 by Representatives Lanteen and Will, also Senators Winter and Simpson, concerning an expansion of a physician's assistant's ability to practice and in connection therewith, changing the relationship between a physician's assistant and a physician or podiatrist from supervision to collaboration for physician's assistants with less experience or who are working in a new specialty, establishing the collaboration requirements and requiring physician assistants with more experience to consult with the physician assistant's healthcare team.
Representative Lanteen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1095 and the committee report.
To the Health and Insurance Committee report. Representative Will.
We need to move L006 to amend the committee report.
And it's displayed, but ask for it to be displayed.
Okay. Oh, and ask for it to be displayed, sorry.
To the amendment.
I'm looking at it, I thought everybody else could see it. Okay, we need to amend the Health and Insurance Committee report.
Representative Lanteen.
Thank you. We are changing the date to February 23rd. Somehow it was misstated, so.
Misstated, yep.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L006. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Amendment L006 passes. To the committee report.
To the committee report. Yes, the committee report, basically it changes the implementation date to July 2023. And we changed the word responsible to liable on page 11, lines 5 and 18, or anywhere else that's where it originally struck. So, and then the other change was that for PAs under a collaborative plan, from 3,000 hours to 5,000 hours.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The committee report passes. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we were working on this bill, I'm sure all of you noticed that maybe we had some concerns from our doctors, and so we listened to those concerns, and we did make some changes, and I do have an amendment, and I move L007 and ask that it be displayed. So, I'll be honest, this was specifically working with the Academy of Family Physicians on their concerns. And the ED physicians also mentioned and requested that an employer, and this amendment, we are changing the employer cannot require a physician to enter into a collaborative plan with a PA as a condition of employment. The bill states that they may require them to work with up to 4, but we amended it to say they cannot do this for any number of PAs. And so we are striking enter into more than 4 plans and adding to enter into a collaborative plan at any time as a condition of employment. So that was one of the concerns. The bill states that a PA needs an additional 3,000 hours for a substantive change in specialty. The family physicians requested we add language that allows the Board of Medicine to define what substantive change in specialty means. And so this amendment adds that on page 7, line 2, and saying as defined in board rule after substantive change. And the family physicians also asked that we further clarify how PAs consult and refer with physicians and members of the healthcare team when a patient presents with conditions that are beyond their scope of practice. The amendment addresses this by stating that a PA must consult and refer through ongoing coordination and communication with physicians and other members of the healthcare team. And we did that striking line 16 and 17 on page 8 and adding refer through ongoing coordination and communication with physicians and other members of the healthcare team based on patient's condition, the physician's assistant's education, experience, and competencies, and the standard of care. And then the last part of the amendment currently states that an employer, group, hospital, and facility can add additional requirements for referral and consultation by PAs. And our family physicians requested that we add physicians to that list who can impose additional requirements around referral and consultation. And we did that. And so those are the pieces of Amendment 7, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on L007? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of L007. All those say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed say nay. The ayes have it. L007 passes to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative
An
Will.
honor to serve with you. So this
Honor's
bill,
mine.
I think, in my opinion, it's a modest bill, but it's very important to rural Colorado. It will increase access to care by updating existing restrictive laws and regulations that require experienced PAs to have a specific relationship with a physician. In rural areas, it's hard to find physicians to supervise PAs. This bill will allow experienced PAs to practice where they are needed within their scope and while still consulting with and when necessary referring to other members of the healthcare team as appropriate. It will require increased access to critical services by allowing experienced PAs to provide these services. Currently, PAs are limited in providing services that their supervising physician is trained in. I've heard some disheartening stories about PAs not being able to provide needed care in rural areas because of this supervision requirement. You will hear some of those stories today. I know just this week, Hospital on the Hill Day, I met with many of my rural hospitals, in fact, on Wednesday, and they told me how much they love this bill and how it will help Colorado. Rural Colorado needs this bill. It's not about competition. There are enough patients to go around to everyone, as we all know. We have a provider shortage, remember? We have a provider shortage. It's about providing quality health care when and where the patients and who needs it. So I'd ask for an aye vote on this bill.
Representative Lontine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve with you too.
The pleasure is all mine.
So why does Colorado need House Bill 1095? This bill will increase access to care, particularly in rural areas, as my co-prime just talked about, where primary care is hard to come by. It reduces administrative burden, helping make PAs more employable and competitive during their hiring process, much like their fellow advanced practice providers and nurse practitioners who share a similar scope of practice. allows PAs to utilize all the skills they've been trained in versus limiting their practice to the skill set of their supervising physician. And it brings the PA practice language in line with the language used by other professionals, including their counterparts, advanced practice registered nurses. 19 other states have done this, and DC, currently use collaboration or a similar term to describe the PA-physician relationship. And 1095 is similar to legislation that recently passed in some of our neighbors, such as North Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. It's important to remember that PAs are not physicians. They cannot do what physicians do, nor do they want to. So when we talk about hours necessary to perform competently and skillfully, it's important to remember that those hours are necessary for what PAs can do and not what physicians can do. And I would just remind members that some of our supporting organizations for House Bill 1095 are the Colorado Rural Health Centers, and they represent nearly 100 rural facilities statewide. The Colorado Community Health Network, which represents the FQHCs around the state, Colorado Consumer Health Initiative, and Healthier Colorado. I thank you for your time, and I ask for an aye vote on House Bill 1095.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Representative Valentine and Representative Will for bringing this bill forward. We all have discussed the price of health care and how it's gone up greatly, and I think a lot of us have promised our constituents that we would bring the price down. That's what this bill does. It brings the price down. And let's just talk basic economics. You have a pool of people providing a service. If you allow more people to provide this service, there's more competition and the price goes down. Now, there's some argument that this may hurt people. But you know what hurts people is when a medical service is so expensive that they never go out and get it. That's what hurts people. We've seen many bills like this associated with the medical industry as well as other industries. And the buzzword is, we can't allow other people to do this service because we got to keep people safe. You know, it just reminds me, I'll go to a BMW dealership and they'll say, if you don't allow us to change your oil at this expensive price, we'll ruin your engine. Well, change my oil myself and it's gone just fine. But one thing this bill doesn't do, it doesn't force you to provide or to go to a provider that you don't want. If you want to go to a doctor, the most expensive doctor, you can still go. This bill's not stopping you. So it gives you a choice. It gives you a choice that, hey, if I want to go to a physician, this went to this school and's been doing this for this much time, I can do it. But also gives you a choice if you, and I've done this before, if you call for an appointment and your doctor's not available for a long time, but they say, I can fit you in, our PA's available today or tomorrow. And so it gives you a choice. So I think that this is a really good bill because it has the capability to bring down price. But also, let's watch out for the buzzwords of the government needs to come in here and tell you what's best for you and not give you a choice. Again, you can still go to your same doctor. This just gives you other people other options. This gives different options to maybe areas of the country or of the state that are least served. Because if you're in maybe a rural area and there's not very many doctors that provide this service or these services, and you have to wait up to months for that service, that's not healthy. But if you can go into and get that service completed by a PA early and maybe catch something, that's beneficial. So I just ask everybody, consider this bill. Consider the prices, how it could drop the price, increase access, and let's watch out for the buzzwords that we always hear in protectionism. Only get that from me. Only get this service from me, because I'm the best. We've heard that in many bills. I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm on the committee that heard this bill, and I voted yes for it. I have to confess, I moved my position on this, and the reason is there is an avenue for this offering, and it's called nurse practitioner. Now, I'm not an expert in this world, so that's why it took me a while to figure that out. But I like the liberty portion of this, and that was the motivation behind my yes vote in committee, that there would be the liberty of folks to operate in that profession, independent of a physician, so that they could offer services at a lower level of expertise for less price, and so more common things like getting some antibiotics for your strep throat and so on could be covered without having to go to the more expensive and less available doctors. So I like that whole idea. However, the name of this role, this profession, is physician's assistant. So it's kind of a truth in advertising matter. This folks who see that physician's assistant title, I think, would very reasonably expect that would be an assistant to a physician. So if someone intends to go into a more independent medical practice and not work directly under the supervision of a physician, they have that opportunity as a nurse practitioner. So that's available now, and I therefore am arriving at a no vote on this one. And by the way, I hate to admit it, but I validated all of my reasoning with Kyle Mullica, Representative Mullica, and he said, yeah, I was thinking right, which, yeah, I know. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Representative Caraveo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to start by thanking the sponsors of this bill. I think that their intentions are absolutely good. I understand their desire to increase access to health care in the state, in particular in rural areas. I just don't think that this bill is the solution for that immense problem. To give you a little bit of background, in order to attain the position that I have as a pediatrician, I went to 4 years of medical school, that's after college, 3 years of residency where I worked on average 80 hours a week. Sometimes it was 60, sometimes it was 120. That is after much repetition, where a lot of the clerkships that I did my third and my fourth year of medical school were very similar to the rotations that I did in residency. At the end of my training, in order for me to practice independently and see children or patients without the supervision of another doctor, which I had been under for 5 years, it would amounted to about 12,000 hours of training. While I absolutely support and appreciate the amendments that increase the hours for training for physician assistants, that just is not at a level where I believe that they should be able to practice independently. Now, there can be debate as to whether this leads to independent practice or not, because they are technically still going to be under the collaboration of a medical team. But supervision and collaboration are very different things. Supervision means that a doctor has direct oversight over the patients that a PA is seeing, and from time to time will directly oversee what they have done in a patient chart, what decisions they have made, and then provide feedback to a physician assistant. With collaboration, it will be entirely up to the PA to decide, should I get input from a doctor or should I not? Now, I practice with physician assistants. They are an integral part of the medical team, and I greatly appreciate their input and their ability to take care of patients at a more basic level than what I can do and what I have trained to do as a physician. But I will tell you that a couple of weeks after we last heard this bill last year, ended session, and then I went immediately back to practice. In 2 days, I caught 4 major mistakes from the mid-levels that I was practicing with. These were mistakes that they had no idea that they had committed. Some were minor. Some were would have been a deciding factor as to whether an infant should have been hospitalized or not. Now, they had no idea that they had made those mistakes, and so they probably never would have asked me as a collaborating physician for my input as to whether they had appropriately managed these children. As I've said, while I greatly admire physician assistants, their training and the way that medical training has been set up has not been in a way to suddenly, after years, change the rules and say, well, we have a shortage in providers, therefore let's change the rules and give individuals with less training the same ability to treat patients as physicians. There are many bills there are a couple of other bills, at least this year, that we are going to be considering as a body that, in my opinion, are better suited to address the shortage that we have in primary care, and in particular in primary care in rural areas. One of them is going to look at international medical graduates, which are physicians who have been trained in other countries and right now are unable sometimes to go through residency training in the United States and then go into areas of shortage. Hopefully, we will be changing that this year, and we will be allowing people who have gone through considerable training to go through additional training and residency to be able to cover these shortages. Just a couple of days ago in the Education Committee, we addressed part of this shortage by looking at a new osteopathic doctor program at the University of Northern Colorado that will be looking specifically at the need for training in a more rural area to produce more physicians to be able to treat the individuals that need treatment in Colorado. There are many ways to address areas of shortage with increases in funding and residency programs, focusing on rural tracks and medical schools that we have taken up in recent years in the legislature and have not gone through with. But instead, what is being presented as a solution is to say, well, we'll just lower the requirements for training and hopefully fill the shortage in that way. I believe that we need to be looking at incentivizing people to go through medical training, to train and practice at the top of their ability, and not changing the rules years after they have been established, because we're going through a moment of difficulty. In particular, after COVID, I will tell you, when doctors are incredibly burnt out, this is another piece of hay on the haystack that is going to convince people that maybe the practice of medicine is not for them. I think that we already have individuals who are thinking of leaving the practice of medicine, and laws such as this, if this were to be passed, are really just a way to convince people, you know what, you don't need to go to medical school. You don't need to devote at least 7 years of your life to the training that is required to be a doctor. Just go to PA school. It will be far cheaper, and you'll essentially get to practice in the same way. I really worry that this is going to disincentivize people like me from going to medical school to go into primary practice in particular, because essentially I would be able to practice in the same manner with much less schooling and much less debt. So once again, while I absolutely understand the motivation behind this bill, I just think that we are going about it in a manner that is going to affect patient safety. I will tell you that the PAs that I work with, while they are incredible, They do not have the training that I have, and patients, do not understand that they do not have that training. We wear name tags, just like we do here. It's actually kind of a requirement. Mine says doctor. Every single PA name badge in my practice says PA. And every single patient that I have seen for the last 10 years says, Dr. So-and-so told me this, Dr. So-and-so said that. We are going to be setting people up to be seen independently by providers who they believe are doctors, who do not have the training, in my opinion, to practice independently. So while I understand the motivations behind this bill, I respectfully ask for a no.
Representative Malika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it's fitting that I follow Representative Caraveo, not only because we obviously both serve in the medical field, but this is kind of how medicine works. You have a hierarchy of people. You have a hierarchy of systems. And the doctor runs the show. And we know that because of the training that they have, because the years and years that they take to go into training. Members, we have 2 medical professionals that work with PAs serving in this chamber. 2. That's the perspective we have. 2 perspectives of working on the front lines, working in this field, working with PAs. And guess what? We both agree that this is not what's best for our patients, that this is not appropriate. It doesn't mean that we don't love PAs. I love the PAs I work with. I don't know what we would do without the PAs that we work with. But what this is happening here is we're bringing a butcher knife to a problem when we need a scalpel. There are legitimate problems, members, that the PAs have brought up. Legitimate problems with our rural healthcare system. But independent practice is not that solution. Independent practice is what's going to be dangerous situations, not only for these practitioners and PAs, but for our patients. When I ran for office, when I came down here, obviously we want to represent our community. And I have the privilege of representing the community that I grew up in. And I'm so proud of that. But I'm also proud to represent nurses. I'm the only nurse that serves in this building. And to be able to represent that profession that means so much to every one of our communities, to represent a profession that takes care of us, all of us, in our most difficult times, is something that I'm very, very proud of. And so when I say that, I'm not coming up here with any vested interest, or I'm not coming up here as a protectionist. I'm not coming up here because my bottom dollar is going to hurt from this, because I serve under doctors. I know the role that I play when I'm taking care of my patients. I'm coming up here for my patients. And that's what I was committed to do when I came down to this building, was that I was going to represent my community, I was going to represent my profession, but almost just as important as all that, I'm going to represent the patients that I take care of, and I'm going to be their voice, and I'm going to advocate for bills that not only improve their lives, but make sure that they can receive care in the best fashion possible. We've heard, members, that this bill is going to solve our rural health care problem. I have yet to hear how this is going to solve our rural health care problem. Are we going to see a gold rush of PAs to the rural areas? Because I don't think we've seen a gold rush of doctors to these rural areas. I don't think we've seen a gold rush of APRNs to these rural areas. If we are legitimately wanting to address the issue with access to health care in our rural areas, then let's do that. Let's do that. Let's not have this be a fake vehicle to try to solve what is a legitimate problem. If we legitimately want to solve this problem, let's start looking at that. Let's start looking at creating programs in those communities. Let's start making sure that these communities can grow their own, so that there's that stability, so that we have these practitioners and these clinicians staying in their community. That's the solution. That's the solution. Creating a more dangerous environment to receive care is not that solution. You know, I talk a lot about being that ER nurse and being that perspective down here. you know, and that's what I bring with me. And I think about my setting, the setting that I provide care in, the setting that I work in, and there is so much teamwork, and there is so much collaboration, and it's what drives me. It's what I love about the ER. And I think about the patients, and I think about, you know, what does this bill do for my patients? And I brought this up in committee, is this bill opens the door to have a whole ER full of PAs, to not have doctors in the ER. Let that sink in for a sec. To have the possibility that we wouldn't have doctors in the ER. That is dangerous, that is scary, that is unacceptable, it's inappropriate. Members, I cannot stress how passionate I am about this, because we are talking about safety. We are talking about our patients here. Look, you know, Representative Caraveo brought it up. If you want to be a doctor, go to medical school. But with the bill that we're passing here, people aren't going to go to medical school anymore. What would be the reason that they would go to medical school if they could go to PA school for a lot less cost, less training, and still be independent practitioners? I also want to bring up another talking point, that when we look at independent practitioners, if it's doctors, if it's APRNs, if it's PAs, and I want to talk a little bit about the schooling and what goes into that. So we know, and we heard from Dr. Caraveo, the thousands of hours that she went to school. And there's more thousands of hours when you start getting into specialties, if it's surgery, if it's anesthesiology, whatever that may be. APRNs, you have to be a nurse before you can be an APRN. Members, PAs go to school to be generalists. Their whole schooling is meant to serve under a physician. And the system's not broke. The system's not broke. The healthcare system as a whole is broke, especially in our rural areas, but this system is not broke. When we look at the collaboration and the teamwork in the ER, that's not broke. But you go to school as a PA specifically to serve under a physician. And the reason that you do that and the reason that it's such a good profession is because you have that. And you only have to go to school for 2 or 3 years, and you can be out there and you can be practicing. But another thing that you can do is that you can jump from specialty to specialty. And that's what people aren't talking about this. You can jump from specialty to specialty. You can't do that as a doctor. You can't do that as an APRN. You go to school for a population, to serve a population as APRN. You go to school for specialties as a doctor. As a PA, you could jump around. And that is terrifying to think about, that you can jump around without oversight. Members, if it was so horrible to be a PA, if it's so tough to be a PA, why is it listed as the 3rd best profession in the entire country? World News ranks PAs as the 3rd best profession in the entire country. And so it's not broken, members. The system's not broken. We have some fixes to do, especially in the rural healthcare setting. And I think that we can make those fixes. And I know, as a healthcare worker, I'm committed to fixing some of the issues that we heard coming from our PAs. But independent practice is not that fix. And this isn't going to solve our rural healthcare problems. We need to come up with legitimate solutions and not take our rural healthcare problems as a vehicle to try to get independent practice. That's wrong. It's bad for our patients. It's unsafe. I'm sure I'll be back up here to talk to you about it, because I'm that passionate about it. I am that passionate to make sure that our patients receive the best care possible. This bill will not allow for that. I strongly, strongly urge a no vote.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is an honor to serve with you.
The honor is mine.
Members, I am here today to speak about the communities I represent, but I want to start by honoring the voices of my colleagues. Representative Mullica, Representative Caraveo both expressed with great expertise their concerns around this legislation. I am always so privileged to learn from them, to understand their perspectives, and I value what they bring to this body
given their medical experience and training. But rural healthcare is different, and to Representative Mullica, he is exactly right. This bill will not solve the rural healthcare crisis. And I, as one who is learning and understanding not only this bill, but all of the challenges we face in rural Colorado around healthcare, am the first to say, I don't think there is a singular solution to solving the challenges we're facing. I'm carrying another piece of legislation to drive more preceptorships into rural Colorado, just to encourage the experience of delivering health care in those beautiful, magnificent parts of our state. But I rise because of the voices in my communities from our federally qualified health centers, those that are on the ground facing the challenges of delivering care to people in faraway places, far away from here at least, and we simply are looking for innovative, creative approaches that are still medically sound and safe. From my Mountain Family Health Center folks, the folks that have provided such incredible guidance and input and expertise to me and my understanding of some of the challenges we face. You know, they share with me how important how important PAs are to their delivery team of care and service. You know, we have PAs who actually lead several of the clinics up in the Roaring Fork Valley, including school-based health centers. And in Summit County, our federally qualified health center runs our school-based health center. And without those PAs and others who are helping to provide service in places where, honestly, we have no one else, our kids, our families would be left without. I'm particularly, inspired by the fact that we talk about PAs and their level of training and experience, and I certainly understand that they are not physicians. And it does need to be clear to patients that they are not. So thank you, Dr. Caraveo, for bringing that up. But in rural areas where we have such dramatic shortages, well-trained PAs are a complementary way to deliver cost-effective, high-quality care. And I want to say that I'm really proud that the sponsors have updated this bill to make sure that the PAs with more than 5,000, not 3,000, but 5,000 practice hours will no longer be required to enter into a specific practice agreement, and that PAs who are changing specialties would be required to collaborate with a physician in that new specialty for 3,000 hours or more. I am by no means an expert in the healthcare industry, but I'm listening to the experts in my community. I am listening to those voices of doctors who are trying desperately to solve a problem in a safe and responsible way. I lift my voice in support of this bill, and I encourage those of you who have not yet had an experience to come up to the high country and want to understand our rural setting when it comes to healthcare, to come for a visit. I'd love to introduce you to some of these folks that I'm hearing from who are on the ground every day in the communities in my district who are desperate for solutions. Again, this will not solve our challenges, but it certainly is one more tool, one more way to help support the working families in rural Colorado. I thank you for your support.
Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I rise in opposition to this bill. And I think it's important to understand what this bill actually does that is in the bill language. So I'm going to go through that a bit. First, I want to talk about what this bill does not do. This bill does not expand access to health care. It does not make health care cheaper. What this bill does do is it allows PAs to treat patients with no, let me repeat, no supervision. And that is a danger to public health. There's been a lot of talk this morning about access. This bill does absolutely nothing to increase access to care. The fact sheet for the proponents says that 13% of PAs live in rural areas, quote, likely due to existing restrictive laws and regulations. Think about that. That is a huge logical leap. And even the text itself admits it. Likely due to existing laws and regulations. What does that even mean, members? There is nothing in this bill that incentivizes anyone to move outside of an urban area. In fact, we already know bills like this don't make anyone move to rural areas. We know this didn't happen with NPs. Members, I have a map here that shows where NPs are in the state of Colorado. Do you want to know where NPs are in the state of Colorado? Urban areas. This did nothing to help access in rural areas. I've heard a lot about urban divide in my time here at the Capitol. And this makes me mad. If you're talking about a rural-urban divide, this is it. This provides substandard care to rural areas. That's what you are doing when you vote for this bill in rural areas. You are saying if you're in a rural area, you get a PA. If you're in Denver, you get a doctor. And that's what this bill does. I also want to talk about costs. This bill says it will decrease health care costs, but it won't. The Mayo Clinic already did research on this, and they found that allowing PAs to practice outside their scope actually increases health care costs. I also want to point out a disparity in the fact sheet that I received from the proponents on a study that they did that was dated, I believe, 2015. I'd like to point you all to a new study from January of 22 from the Hattiesburg Clinic. I have the study here if anyone would like to read it. They did exactly what Colorado is contemplating doing. They had PAs in a collaborative setting to see if it would reduce healthcare. They did this for 15 years. I have a 15-year study where they looked at costs because they were wanting to promote access, decrease costs. And guess what, members? At the end of this study, I quote, "We believe very strongly that nurse practitioners and physician assistants should not function independently." And the cost increase was $10.3 million in this study. Happy to share. Now I want to talk about what this bill does do. This bill puts people's lives at risk. The fact sheet from the proponents paints this bill as a series of small tweaks. It's a paperwork issue. It's an administration issue. It's a wording issue. But make no mistake, I want you to look at the bill, members. Look at page 2 of the bill. This bill literally redefines the practice of medicine. Read it, CRS 1224-107, quote, "Practice of medicine defined." This bill is not about tweaks. This bill guts the statute. This bill guts Colorado's definition of the practice of medicine and who is qualified to do it safely. It completely eliminates supervision. Not just the word, it eliminates the entire concept. The bill claims that the PAs would be required to consult with or refer to the appropriate member of the healthcare team. But that is false. If you actually read the bill, it does not require this. The bill only allows for discretionary conversations between PAs and doctors, and it places the burden on the PA. That is confusing. You don't know what you don't know. So under a supervision model as it currently stands, you're being supervised. But how do you know whether to ask questions if you don't know what you don't know? Makes no sense. Skin cancer is a good example of this. A PA has a much higher likelihood of missing a life-threatening melanoma compared to a dermatologist. That's cancer. Missing a cancer diagnosis. How would a PA even ask for help if they missed this in the first place? PAs, don't get me wrong, PAs play a critical role in our healthcare system, but they cannot replace doctors. You've already heard from Dr. Caraveo and Representative Mullica on the training component, so I'm going to skip my portion of that, but I think that is obvious. I wanted to point out also that on the fact sheet, the proponents try to reassure you by saying that, quote, the Colorado Medical Board will retain the ability to investigate and discipline PAs who exceed their scope. Great, that's obvious. Thanks for including that. But when does the Colorado Medical Board investigate or discipline a PA? After something goes wrong, after someone dies. That's what we're doing here. The vast majority of Americans, and even the instructors who train PAs, want you to see a doctor. 84% of Americans want a doctor to have primary responsibility for diagnosing and managing their health care, meaning they want a doctor leading the team. 95% of Americans want to have a doctor involved in at least some way for diagnosis and treatment. And I want you to think about the emails that we've received on this bill. Have they been about patients who think that this is going to give them access and decrease costs? Is that who you've been hearing from? No, we've been hearing from PAs who are pushing this, not from everyday Coloradans who are going to suffer because of this bill. "98% of PA program medical directors think that PA programs don't prepare graduates to practice without a doctor." 98%. If the people who are training the PAs tell you that PAs are not equipped to practice without doctor supervision, what are we doing here? Honestly, ask yourselves, what are we doing here if the teachers themselves are saying it's not safe for PAs to practice without a doctor in charge in a supervision role? Medical error is already one of the leading causes of death in America. There is already a nationwide problem of PAs practicing outside the scope of their training. Why make it worse? If this bill passes, it will lead to misdiagnosis, adverse health events, unnecessary deaths, and increased health costs. Again, why are we even here? I agree with the problem that we're trying to solve, but this is not it. Members, this is not it. I want to be in a state where what we're doing is making sure that all Coloradans have affordable, high-quality health care. And that's why I am against this bill, and that's why I ask for all of you to be against this bill as well. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
The honor is mine.
And thank you, members. I rise in opposition to this bill today, but not because I have anything against PAs. In fact, I see a PA very frequently, that they function as my primary care doc. I love my PA, as does the doctor that they work under. What I want to just bring to all your attention, this is one of those scope of practice fights that I think is always challenging for us when they come before us, because essentially the 65 of us, for the most part, are not practicing in this field. And we are asked to weigh in on a very complicated and nuanced issue that everyone in this field is very familiar with, yet we, in general, are not. But to me, I think it speaks volumes that we had our two people who work in this setting on the front lines every day, our very own Dr. Caraveo and Representative Mullica, who are coming down and saying that the current system works, that the PAs are an integral part of the healthcare system, but within the scope that they're already practicing in. And I would just urge all of us when considering this vote to place extra weight to the voices from those two representatives, because they live this and they're in that profession. And if they're coming down here and saying that they have issues with this bill, I think that members ought to carry the day. You know, looking at this, I think there are very compelling arguments that rural Colorado is in a dire healthcare need, but I don't think that this bill is going to cause PAs or anybody to go out into rural healthcare settings. I had the privilege of talking with a couple of medical students the other day at CU. They were in their first and second years. And I asked all of them where they were from, and they were from various places around the country, and I asked where they were all intending on going. And they all generally said, because they were in their first and second years, I think they all said they wanted to be either a general practitioner or an internal medicine doc. But the thing that stood out to me was they all wanted to practice in the city, with the exception of one student. And that was the student that was from Canyon City. And he said that he wanted to go back and practice at home. And this reflects perfectly the experience that I heard from my friend, who is an anesthesiologist now, but when he went through CU Medical School 6 years ago, had the exact same experience where his cohorts all wanted to practice in urban settings, and there were 2 of his cohorts that sought the rural track, and it was because they grew up in rural communities. That is going to be the secret to getting rural care. It is going into those communities, finding kids in Brush, in Akron, in Montrose that want to become doctors, want to go to medical school, and then return home to the communities that they've grown up in. You're not going to get it by passing a bill allowing for PAs to move there, because there just isn't that incentive. I just don't see where somebody who's practices a PA in an urban setting is suddenly going to say under this bill, oh, I'd like to move out to the Eastern Plains, or I'd like to move to the Western Slope, because that's not their experience. That's not where they work. So, members, when you're considering this bill, again, I would just underscore, I think they've identified a real issue with this bill. I don't think that this is the solution. And I think the most important thing we need to do is listen to the 2 people in this chamber who practice in this field every day, and they have issues with it, and I think that should carry the day, because they are the experts on this bill, and their concerns should be held above, in my opinion, a lot of the other ones that we've heard. So, thank you.
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry, I kept changing my mind whether or not I was going to come down and speak. I actually don't know where I'm going to fall on this bill, but one thing I'll add is some of you know I used to represent some of the healing art boards that are housed within the Attorney General, or not housed, but the AG's office represents them. And so one of the things I'll say is that PAs they're what we call their organic statute, so they are housed under the Board of Medicine. And that's important just because I think, and I don't know where this bill is going to land, but I think there should be some clarifying language in the bill that should this bill move forward, what this bill does is take the PAs out from under the supervision of the Board of Medicine and physicians, out from under supervision of a physician. What I'm struggling with is I don't actually understand what the scope of practice of a physician is now if we do this. So of a PA is. So if this bill passes in its current form and a PA is practicing out from under the supervision of a physician, I do not understand what now is the difference between a physician and a physician assistant. And I've looked at the statute, and the statute just directs currently that the scope of practice of a physician assistant is what is authorized is basically what the physician they operate under can do. So the only point I want to bring to today's discussion is that it is still unclear to me, which I think is a problem, is if this bill passes, what is the scope of practice of a physician assistant? So my only suggestion is, moving forward with this bill, I think that needs to be clarified. What I think happens is because they are licensed by the Board of Medicine, the Board of Medicine will undergo rulemaking and will say what PAs can and cannot do. That's not entirely clear to me in this language, so I think, again, just a suggestion. So ultimately, the Board of Medicine is comprised of professionals in that field. I believe a PA sits on that, physicians sit on it. So what I'm saying is a majority of physicians would actually be determining what the scope of practice is. So to the extent this legislative body has concerns that if this bill passes, you'll have PAs practicing beyond what physicians do or at the level that they do, I think we can mitigate that by ensuring that the Board of Medicine is clear in defining what the scope of practice is for PAs. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is one of the most difficult and complicated bills, I believe, easily of the day and perhaps of the week. Torn between two positions, the physician's assistants community and the medical doctors, and all of the stakeholder associations that represent each. Now, what I have to do as the representative that represents House District 64, and this is very difficult. I've heard both sides of the situation. I understand both sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, what must I do? I must vote to put people over policy in this case. Now you ask, what in the world do you mean, Holtorf? Well, allow me to explain, if you'd be so kind to give me your attention. In the far reaches of my district, very close to the Kansas border, very close to the Oklahoma border, very close to the New Mexico border, even into my colleague in House District 65, very close to the Kansas border, very close to the Nebraska border, very close to the Wyoming border, we have small towns. These towns are very small, but they have people that live there. Populations of 50, 100, 200, 500. And ladies and gentlemen, the real issue is we cannot get medical care because we don't have the medical practitioners to provide that care. In this particular bill, in this particular discussion, I would argue to my colleagues that some care is better than no care. I always tell people something is better than nothing, albeit something small, perhaps relatively insignificant, but to the person that needs that care that day, it means everything. Now, I've heard the argument about life. I've heard the argument about quality of care. I will tell you, physician's assistants are more professional than they're given credit for. I don't think any PA would do anything to harm a patient. But I will tell you, when I have clinics that don't have doctors or lack doctors, when I have hospitals that have had to shut down, when I have clinics that have had to shut down because they can't staff and provide medical services. And then here's the problem for rural Colorado, and I'm looking for Representative Gray so I can make eye contact. The rural-urban divide. I'm going to talk to this. When you have to drive 1, 2, or 3 hours to get any kind of medical care because that clinic is closed, that a physician's assistant could perhaps be there to run. That's a problem for my people. Now, mind you, where I live, you might have to drive an hour or an hour and a half just to get a gallon of milk and a dozen eggs. You've got to understand that. And that's just groceries. But what about medical care? So I'm going to wrap up my conversation because there's other people to speak that can talk more eloquently and more passionately than me about this. But I will tell you, I have to support this bill. I have to support this bill because of the conundrum we find ourselves in. And I have to support any kind of health care for my rural community in the far reaches of my House district. So for the bill sponsors, I will be a yes today.
Representative Pelton. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I rise in support of this bill. When I was a county commissioner, we had a county-owned hospital. So I was very involved with board meetings and staffing of the clinic and the hospital and stuff. It was all we could do to get one doc to fill the spot to keep from running that one dock clear into the ground. If it wasn't for physician's assistants, we would have no hospital, no clinic. And, you know, we're 3 hours from our community into the Front Range. So, you know, I've not seen any decline or substandard care from the physician assistants that we get. And so for those reasons, I am completely behind this bill. So thank you.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's an honor to serve with you.
The honor is mine.
Members, I rise in strong opposition of this bill. As many of you know, I sit on the board of a hospital in Delta, Colorado. I was duly elected by the people of the special district, which is the county of Delta County. What this bill is continuing the war on rural Colorado. It calls for a substandard class of care for rural hospitals, because what I've heard throughout this debate is that the goal of this bill is to send PAs to rural hospitals and not physicians. Rural Colorado needs doctors. We need MDs. We have the ability right now to get physician's assistants. But the real struggle is getting doctors in rural Colorado. This bill continues the war on rural Colorado. It creates a class system saying that those of us who choose to live 5 hours from the biggest city in Colorado do not deserve to have the same level of care. And it's time to say enough is enough. The other element that's in this bill that is of grave concern is the effect it will have on rising medical expenses. The medical malpractice that's contemplated here is not the same as a physician. But yet, if you turn to page 11 in the bill, they've struck out that the physician is supervising, and they've replaced that with the word collaborating, which means this bill is moving a physician assistant to being on the same level as a doctor. But yet, the PA does not carry the same liability as a doctor. They still get to hover under the physician's assistant. We heard during debate that it would never be the case of a physician assistant going and operating independently. Well, many of you probably have never looked at the hospital's finances from the point of view of making money. Of course you would create an independent PA practice. You can bill more and pay less. It's called business. It's how you make a profit. That also drives up the cost of health care, and it will drive up the cost of health care in rural Colorado, guaranteed. So we're getting it from the business side, we're also getting it from the increase in medical malpractice side. Under current law, the physician's assistant is a subordinate to the physician. This makes them the equivalent of peers. As we've heard, it will have a chilling effect on individuals going to medical school, or at least going out to rural Colorado. A physician is held to the standard of conduct of what physicians in the same specialty would have done at the same time under the same circumstances. This changes that standard. Because now we're not talking a physician, now we're talking moving a PA up, but yet we're not increasing the liability there. I have grave concerns, members. I fear for what the future of healthcare in rural Colorado will be. I fear what will happen in rural Colorado if this bill passes. I don't want to treat rural Colorado as the ugly stepchild. We deserve to have doctors of our own, not just a slate of PAs and an independent practice of PAs where a physician may be sitting over here in Denver. I ask for a strong no vote, members. Thank you.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to be really brief on this. Folks probably know that a lot of my family members are in the medical profession. My mom was an OBGYN, my brother's an anesthesiologist, and my new brother, thanks to Ancestry.com, is a nurse anesthetist. He's great. And what I will say briefly is that I 100% agree with what I heard from my colleague from Delta County. I'm concerned about a system that allows a lower level of care to be pervasive in communities that need more access, quite frankly. But I want to be clear, this is not a bill just about rural Colorado. If it was, it would say physician assistants in rural Colorado. This impacts the entire state. And I believe that we should not reduce care, because if we do, it will actually also have a disproportionate impact on those who rely on public health, like Black and brown people, immigrants, folks who use federally qualified health centers, from actually ensuring that their standard of care is a high standard. We already know the needs are different. We already know the needs are unique, and they do take skill. And I believe that we should have access to the same quality of care as someone who can choose their doctor in certain areas, or have the ability to choose and the money to just choose their doctor. And so as someone who has higher needs with asthma, who has had a doctor actually ask me if it's okay if a PA performs certain exams on me as opposed to a doctor, but having a doctor supervise the entire process, I think it's essential that we have doctors involved, that we continue the supervision, and that we ensure that high quality and high standard of care reaches across the state of Colorado in the metro and the rural areas. So I appreciate the passionate response from my colleague from Delta County. I stand with you and ask that we expand that exact argument that you made to folks in all communities in Colorado, because I think we all deserve a high standard of care. So thank you for that.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in opposition to this as well, but I'm going to focus this a little bit. My son is a doctor, has been in practice for 10 years, and he has physician assistants. He supervises them, and he's made the same points that have been made very eloquently already. As a doctor, he spent 10 years getting there before he entered practice. Physician assistant says 3 or 4. And one of the comments that my son made is, in the medical field, you will be humbled very quickly when you think you know what you're doing. The physician assistant is a vital part of the team, but he's part of the team. And he does need to operate, he or she needs to operate under that supervision. That supervision can come from a lot of different ways. There's nothing that says that have to be in the same place. That doctor can be one place and the physician assistant can be someone else. We have wonderful capability now called telemedicine. When I was down with COVID, I got a telemedicine. That doctor could have been in the other side of the world, but he was there and we had that connection. So that can work just as well as any place else. I also heard the argument here, a very strong supply side argument, supply and demand. If you want to lower the cost, you increase the supply. Well, there's nothing in this bill that actually increases the supply. It just opens up how the doctors and physician assistants operate. But I don't believe this helps us. I think there's another way to do it, and I ask for a no vote.
Representative Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, I reflect down here, my 8 years down here in the opening day speeches that we hear given every time, and we talk about a common thing on both sides of the aisle. We hear a lot about bridging the rural and urban divide. This bill does that. We've heard that it doesn't, but right now the problem we have in rural Colorado is there's no options. A PA may not be as qualified as a physician, but at least they have that option to start with that can take care of most of their medical needs. We've heard from both sides of the aisle and the governor's office how we want to lower the cost of living in Colorado. This bill will do just that. This bill will help to lower the cost of living for healthcare costs for Coloradans. We hear that this won't increase the supply. Let me tell you what happens if this bill doesn't pass. We've heard that Utah, Wyoming, and other states around our neighboring state have passed this bill. We're going to see PAs that are tired of our system that says, and this is the only licensing thing that I can think of, maybe I'm wrong, but the only thing that I can think of that says, if you have this license, you must work for, be supervised, and employed by this other licensing. They are literally conscripted by a different license. We have other licensings like paralegals and whatnot, but those paralegals have to work with attorneys, just like under this bill, physician's assistants would have to work with physicians, but it gives them the autonomy to open their own practice. If they don't have the ability to do that, they are going to flee the state. So this will absolutely increase the supply, and we might even get some PAs from other states who don't have this come to Colorado because they want to open their own practice and increase the supply and lowering the overall price of health care. We've heard, well, the data shows that PAs aren't going to move to rural Colorado if this happens, but then on the other foot we hear that, well, that's subservice care. So which one is it? I'm having trouble understanding. I mean, to me, what this bill does ultimately is expand consumer choice. And I trust my consumers to make a decision. I think what the practical effects of this is going to be is eliminate some situations like I've experienced personally. When I caught COVID in the middle of December, my primary care doctor's office had a policy they wouldn't see me and just referred me to the ER. I've talked to that PA specifically who I normally see at that doctor's office, and she absolutely disagreed with that. She absolutely disagreed with that policy, but since she was forced to work for that doctor, she had to abide by that policy. And it made no sense, ladies and gentlemen. I was never in the condition where I needed to go to the ER, but that's what they were pushing. So I had to search for other doctor's offices that didn't have that same policy so I could actually get early treatment. I know only having 60% lung capacity, I was concerned about it. I knew what I needed, and I knew early treatment would be positive. And this bill would expand that type of choice for me. So I urge a strong yes vote for this. This will deliver some of the promises that we've made, at least in my last 8 years, to our constituents, of bridging the urban and rural divide, of lowering the cost of living for Coloradans, increasing consumer choice, increasing innovation, because now we're going to have other PAs that can operate maybe in a different manner that actually helps bring innovation to the system. Maybe it's a new business model that we haven't seen yet that helps lower costs. So I urge a strong yes vote. We've made these promises over and over and said what we want to do for our constituents, and I believe this bill does it. And look, it's been 8 years I've been down here with Representative Lontine, and I can probably only count on the one hand how many times we've agreed on something. We get along, but we disagree quite a bit. So I'm happy that she's got this bill along with Perry Will. I think it's not only going to help urban Colorado or rural Colorado, it's going to help the suburban Colorado and urban Colorado. Because now we will have more options, more people can be employed, innovate, do things differently that's actually going to help our constituents and deliver on some of the things that we've all said in our campaign speeches over and over.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you. I'm speaking for rural Colorado because that's where I live, so although I would love to say that I grew up in Lakewood and I can speak for all of that, that was so long ago, it's silly. So I am speaking about rural Colorado today, and we have to live with teams. We don't get to do much by ourselves. When we need help, we have to call on our neighbors and our friends to help us out. And this is teamwork, to have these PAs working with doctors, supervised by them. You can have one doctor, you can have 4 PAs, and you can get a lot of work done because it's not one doctor for all those people. You can divide it between a group and a team of people who are all working together. Whoops, I lost it on here. My constituents are writing me that they want this bill to pass. They tell me about how the doctors do the prescribing, but the PAs can have a little bit more time with the patients. They are spending time, energy, love with the patients. Oh, thank you. We were sharing stuff. Should have texted it to her. PAs that have been there for 20 years are still being supervised by doctors. They are still great PAs, the doctors are still great doctors, but they are taking care of their patients. They are working as a team. It's going to increase access to critical services by experienced PAs to provide those services. Currently, the PAs are limited, but they are going to be working on a team and will be able to provide the needed services to our rural constituents. We live very, very far from doctors' offices in rural Colorado. We don't have the opportunity to go down the street and get an ambulance. It would take a couple hours for an ambulance to get to our house, and then you'd still take a couple of hours to get to the next hospital. So to have a doctor's office in town that we can go where there's a PA to maybe meet you, maybe the doctor's doing something else, the PA can get started with the patients. This lets everybody have the opportunity for good health, no matter where you live. And I can't say enough about how important this bill is for rural Colorado. And again, I can't speak to this place that has no parking spots, but I can speak to rural Colorado. And this is the best bill ever for our health care.
Representative Lontine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we've certainly had a robust discussion this morning, and I really appreciate that. But I feel like I have, first of all, a story to tell, and then I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things we did here. I don't know if many of you know this. My mother's had a lot of health concerns over the last year. You know, it's part of getting old. And, you know, that's what we all hope for, is to get old, right? Because it's better than the alternative. But, you know, one of her struggles, she required some specialty care. And when she went to get this care, and I ended up going with her on a couple of these visits because I happened to be down there, and she just really needs somebody there to go with her to the doctor's office. At this point in her life. And she received this specialty care from a PA. And the PA, I, you know, watched her work, and we had great conversations with her. And it took a while to address, you know, the health issue my mother was struggling with. But she was finally able to get her concern under control. And, you know, in discussions with the PA who delivered this care, and this is in Florida, so they're under a whole different regulatory issue, and I don't even know how PAs are regulated in Florida. And so I can't really make an apples-to-apples comparison. It's just to tell you that while we were working with this PA to get her situation under control, she was quite clear in that she was consulting directly with the doctor that she was working under. And that's the model that PAs are trained to work in, is a team care approach. And that is what we are trying to strive for here. I heard a story up here that insinuated that, you know, when people in underserved communities have to see PAs, that they are getting substandard care. And that was frankly a little insulting to PAs who do deliver quality care and do take care of their patients within their scope. As the experience and the story that I just told you clearly illustrated. You know, to claim that PAs are going to make all these mistakes, well, you know, there's always a story about medical mistakes. Because guess what? Medical providers are human. We can't help being human. And so mistakes will be made, to the point that discipline doesn't happen until after someone is injured. Well, that happens for doctors as well. I just want to be very clear about that. I can tell you some egregious stories about things that doctors have done that have harmed and, frankly, killed patients. I'm not saying this to inflame anybody. There are great doctors. Our own Dr. Caravejo, I've never been to her because she's a pediatrician and I didn't. She's actually younger than me. And so that wouldn't work. But I know that she delivers great care and that she genuinely cares about her patients and does the best thing for them. And I don't want to pit providers against providers. That is not what this bill is about. PAs do not want to be doctors. They are not trained to be doctors. They are not trying to be doctors. This is not a mechanism to put them into independent practice. I'd like to talk about some of those claims around independent practice because it's frankly not true. House Bill 1095 requires PAs to work with a physician in a collaborative plan for the first 5,000 hours, which is roughly 2.5 years. The physician and employer can require anything in that collaborative plan. If they want to continue with business as usual, that's their choice. They can make that happen. After 5,000 hours, a PA must consult and refer, which is exactly the story that I just told you about the PA who my mother saw this past year, who took excellent care of her. The employer, hospital, facility, or physician will determine how PAs refer and consult. An employer may require further collaboration after 5,000 hours is completed. Again, that's their decision. A PA cannot open their own practice. We are not allowing for that. The current is that if there's a practice opened and there's joint ownership between a doctor and a PA, the PA cannot own more than 49%. We are not allowing them to hang out their own shingle by themselves. And finally, PAs are regulated by the medical board, just as doctors are. And that board is made up of physicians, a few consumers, and 2 PAs. And it is the medical board's determination of what their scope of practice should be. I am taking very seriously the suggestion made by Representative Tipper to clarify that further. And I'm hoping that that could be something in the second chamber we can do if we can trust that process. Because it's got to make it through the Senate as well as the House. We are the originating chamber. And finally, there was a point brought up that people may confuse a PA with a doctor. The medical board requires that PAs disclose that they are PAs. An ER full of PAs, that is not what we're trying to do here. This was a comment that was made during committee. PAs are trained to work in a team. They want to continue to work on a team. They do not want to take over an ER. That is not what we are trying to do here at all. The comment that the system is not broken, it is broken because PAs are limited by the jobs. They are not able to find a job under the current system. The numbers are clear when we are looking at jobs here, even in Colorado. Nurse practitioner job, and I'm not trying to pit NPs because they're great providers too, but there have been 249 job postings for PAs to 73 jobs, nurse practitioners to 73 jobs for PAs. In Denver specifically, 148 jobs posted for NPs and 12 jobs for PAs. They are interchangeable in the clinic setting, and so why is there such a disparity in job postings and hirings? third best profession. That may be nationally, but if you can't find a job, that's not much of a profession. And that is literally what we're talking about here, folks. You know, I have a couple of other things I could expound on, but I felt like those were the things that must be addressed, that were brought up. I hate that this has become a pitting of one profession against the other, because it really shouldn't be. Because PAs want to be a part of a team. That's how they work. They don't want to be doctors. They're not claiming to be doctors. And so I would ask for your consideration and thought and support in voting for House Bill 1095.
Representative Well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to expand on that, you know, about the emergency room, they're not physicians, and they won't be manning the emergency rooms. That's a huge credibility as a liability issue for a hospital or a clinic. So, you know, they're not looking to get sued because there's PA in the emergency room. And asking a little bit, talking about what Representative Tipper said, PAs, they do have a scope of practice under current law, and under the PA scope of work is delegated, and this bill would remove that delegation. However, on page 3 and line 7 of this bill indicates what the PA scope of practice will be: practice of medicine to the extent and in the manner authorized by the board. Just like any other statutory change, the board will have to update its rules in conformance with the statutory change. You know, we amended the bill to allow for the medical board, which oversees the PAs, to define substantive change in the specialty. Trust the Board of Physicians will do that. What's best for the patients and for the PAs. PAs are just that. It's been stated multiple times. They're physician's assistants. They're not physicians. PAs have their role in the healthcare system and their healthcare team, and that it's not that of a physician. Physicians operate, PAs assist, okay? Oncologists treat cancer. PAs treat cancer. PAs assistance in the removal of lesion and management of the patient. All kinds of, if the physician assistant wants to be a physician, they can go to school and become a physician. Nothing in this bill allows them to be a physician. So we heard a lot from rural Colorado, and you know, I know there's been, and I don't like it to be an argument either about, and I don't want pitting one profession against another. But I think you heard from Rep. Pelton there. You know, out in that country, I grew up in that Rep. Pelton's district. So, you know, any kind of medical help you can find or get is important. And I'm not saying, you know, some people are saying, well, it's not going to make PAs rush out to those rural areas. Well, in some instances, if you can get a PA within 100 miles, that's helpful. A doctor's appointment, going to see someone, it's huge in these rural areas. You heard Representative McLaughlin talk about it as well. And I think there's a lot of people in this room don't grasp how that works in rural Colorado. And those of us that live it understand it. And I don't know if it's going to be a flood of PAs out to rural Colorado. I don't know that. Rep. Mulcahy talked about grow your own. I'm telling you, growing your own is, I agree with that. That's the best thing ever to get doctors. If we can get them from Montrose and those kids in school to be a physician that's going to go back and practice in Montrose, I agree with that. And I think we should work on those type of things. Right now, for rural Colorado, I think this is a fix we currently have in front of us right now, and I'd ask for an aye vote on this bill.
Representative Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did not realize that we were ending debate, so I apologize for going out of order. I know the decorum in the chamber is that these bill sponsors go last, which they certainly have an opportunity to do after I give you a few last points. But this issue is very important to me. I have been wanting to talk to you all again. And I really wanted to bring up something that I heard that I actually can't believe I heard in this chamber. I quote, "Some healthcare is better than no healthcare." Again, some healthcare is better than no healthcare. Wow, rural Colorado. I can't even believe that that was said. Talk about a slippery slope for other issues. Some healthcare is better than no healthcare. I want to talk about the costs here and really talk about where exactly we're coming from with the costs and where costs are going in healthcare. You know, salaries of doctors and PAs and healthcare workers make up about 8% of total healthcare costs. PAs bill for 85% of what physicians bill. So when you're talking about costs and where costs are being saved in a bill like this, costs are being saved by hospitals, by those freestanding emergency rooms that you see, the owners of those. Costs are not being saved to your patients. It just doesn't make any sense. I also wanted to talk about the collaboration. I think it's important to understand the difference between supervision and collaboration. I want to talk about how supervision is actually defined. I want to talk about statute. I'm an attorney. I want to go there. Sorry. Supervision is defined in statute and further defined in rules of the Colorado Medical Board. Supervision requires ongoing communication, consultation, and oversight and guidance. Supervision is an active relationship in which the physician can interject their education, training, and experience for the benefit of patient care. Now I want to talk about the changes from supervision to collaboration. Collaboration means only that the PA and physicians are cognizant of the PA's qualifications and limitations. The PA consults when the PA deems appropriate, and the physician provides guidance when asked. Again, I repeat, how do you know what you don't know? How do you know to ask questions? How do you know if you're doing anything wrong if there's not any supervision? And I want to talk about the 5,000 hours. Sure, you have to have 5,000 hours to become unsupervised, which is what this does. But after 5,000 hours, if you want to switch to a different area of medicine, you only have to do 2,000 hours. So essentially, you could be doing, I think there was a cosmetic injection, someone who testified at the committee hearing that I heard from, but I'm sure they're really good at that, but then they could go and work in the cardiologist department with 2,000 hours, then unsupervised. That's essentially what this bill does. And I think that that is a problem. We should not be allowing subpar medical treatment anywhere in the state. And I want to just point out another study I thought was interesting. The Journal of Nursing Regulation, because we're talking a lot about NPs and PAs here. The official publication of the National Council of State Boards of Nursing agrees that under current conditions, NPs should not perform unsupervised care in emergency settings, regardless of state law or hospital regulation. That's the Journal of Nursing Regulation. And I thought that I should just point that out because there's a lot of parity being described by the two. So in closing, members, I also heard, a bunch of references to going into an ER, and so I just want to put this scenario in your minds. Imagine when you or a family member were sick or injured and really hurt, and you needed care very quickly. You go to an emergency room. You've been in a car accident. It's your father, your mother, your kid, your wife. You walk into that ER. Who do you want to treat you? an unsupervised PA, or a doctor who has years and years and years of medical training and then experience. Fundamentally, this bill is undermining the integrity of the medical system here in Colorado. This bill takes out the basic guardrails we put in place to protect our citizens. These are critical checks and balances we have to keep patients safe. Frankly, what this bill is, members, is it's an admission of failure. This says, we know there are areas in this state that don't have enough doctors. We know you need better access. We know you deserve high quality care, but we have failed to come up with a way to get qualified doctors to you. So instead, here's an unsupervised PA. Here's substandard medical treatment. Sorry, that's the best we can do. I'm not signing on to that. I am not telling people in rural Colorado that instead of training doctors, we're going to force them to submit a lower standard of care. There is no question that access to healthcare is a problem that needs to be addressed. The cost of healthcare is a huge problem, but there are other ways of tackling it. If anyone puts forward a bill that does in fact promote access to healthcare in rural areas, that does in fact decrease costs, that ensures safe care, believe me, I will be the first one to be in support of that bill. But this is not it. This bill is expensive, ineffective, and a danger to public safety. I believe that all Coloradans deserve affordable, high-quality health care, and that's why I am against this bill, and that's why I urge you members to be against this bill. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to clarify a few points made in the previous testimony that I will tell you are baseless. And yeah, believe it, because I'll stand behind it. The clinics at the far end of my district that are closed now because they couldn't staff, that's real. Okay? That's real to eastern Colorado. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about some baseless claims that have been made. Let's talk about the real world. I've got family in the medical industry. And I won't get into details, but how many times has a young medical doctor had to look to a nurse, look to an ultrasound technician, because he or she does not have the medical experience to make the proper determination? I will tell you there are stories around my kitchen table where my daughters, albeit young, have had to help a medical doctor make the proper decision based on their technical specialty and expertise because that doctor did not have it. So let's not beat our chest up here and talk about how great all the doctors are everywhere and how they know everything. And a PA just can't possibly provide the same level of care. I will tell you a PA, and I'm going to talk about the real world here. Let's talk about the real world, not fiction. Okay? There are many PAs that stand there after 20, 30 years of practicing that are helping young doctors learn their field. And the fact that they are there mentoring them makes them a better doctor 5, 10 years down the road. So let's not sit here and make baseless claims. Now, there's more to the story. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little story because I love to tell stories. There was a young Army aviator who served his country and had 12 years of operational aviation experience all over the world, flying multi-million-dollar helicopters in many continents. Now, when this young man, for 12 years of operational aviation, had to get his flight physical and maintain his flight health proficiency, which is an annual requirement in the military for all aviators, regardless of service, you have to go through a very comprehensive medical evaluation. I will tell you, 80% of the time, as I served, the physician's assistant was the one that signed off on my flight physical certificate because there weren't enough flight surgeons in the Army to cover all the work. We couldn't make enough of them. And a flight surgeon is a very highly specialized medical field. The PAs did the heavy lifting every day for all the flight crews in the United States Army in every unit I served. And that was many divisions and many units. Now, I didn't want to talk about this, but I guess we're going to have to. I was not going to even go down this road. But you want to talk about the real world? I'll give you a taste of the real world now. Rural Colorado. You're telling us this does not help rural Colorado? My colleague back there from Cheyenne Wells knows darn well that this helps, immensely helps the medical service that we don't have out there. Unequivocally, without a doubt, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the real world. I'm going to bring it home now. This issue pulls both ways. I get that. But what about the people out there in the hinterlands? What about my people? The little people in the middle of nowhere? That don't have access to anything. It takes an hour or two, maybe 3 to get there. Don't tell me a PA can't give them some care. And something is better than nothing. And if you want to think that these PAs are underqualified, I will tell you, I know they're more professional than that. And I'm going to make another point right here, right now. Telehealth is here, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a PA and you got a question, smile and dial. And hope you have internet. But if you do, talk to a doctor. It happens all the time. Do the collaborative medicine that we're up here beating our chest about. And let those PAs provide service to rural Colorado. Now I'm going to read one letter here, because I want everybody to hear this. And I wasn't going to read this letter, but I think it needs to be read right here and right now. So allow me. Dear legislators, as the Director at Large of the Society of Emergency Medical PAs, SEMPA, and an emergency medicine physician assistant in northern Colorado for 22 years, it has come to my attention that the opinion of the SEMPA regarding House Bill 221095 has been misrepresented by organizations that oppose this bill. Now, this is not the organization speaking. This is the individual who is a director on this organization who believes that this needs to be stated today. You all have this email, by the way, but I want everybody to hear it. SEMPA supports the physician-led practice of emergency medicine, but also supports the general tenets of optimal team practice as outlined by AAPA. We have not rendered opinion on any individual state bills, but this is his personal statements, and I'm not going to mention his name. Y'all can go to the email and read it yourselves. It is unfortunate that those opposing this bill have leveraged our good relationship between PAs and physicians in a disingenuous fashion by misconstruing statements and rendering testimony that is inaccurate. These are not my words. We try to improve our relationships with our emergency physician colleagues around the country and continue to meet routinely to enhance and improve this relationship. I am, that is the author of this letter, not me. I am unfortunately disappointed in hearing that their organizations misrepresent statements regarding this bill. We hope to continue to have open and frank conversations with our emergency physician colleagues. In my personal opinion, this is not me, this is the author of this letter, I support physician-led practice of medicine, and this has been talked to. This doesn't take that away. This doesn't erase that. This bill in no way endorses the independent practice of PAs, as alleged by the opposition that have spoke today, loud and clear. This bill places the supervision of PAs in the hands of physicians, employers, and medical institutions to be decided as medically appropriate at the practice level. And the bill sponsors have talked to this. The bill allows PAs to bill for care they provide. Oh, so it is about the money. It's always about the money.
Representative Holtorf.
PAs increase access to safe, cost-effective health care. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I believe every word of this letter. It's not disingenuous. It's honest. And as we sit here and hit the paddle ball and the ball flies back and forth, I will tell you I'm going to vote on the side of real people in real places, in real spaces, at the edge of this state who have nothing right now and just want something. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And that's the way it is in the real world.
Representative Mullica.
I'll just put that right there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So before I get started, I want to preface what I'm about to say with that I don't know everything. My wife is very quick to let me know that every single day, that I don't know everything. But I do know nursing, and I'm a good nurse. And if we want to sit up here and talk about the real world, we want to sit up here and talk about facts and fiction, I'm going to bring my perspective. And members, if you could listen, members, because this matters. This matters. 2 people in this chamber work in the medical field. 2 people in this chamber actually work with PAs. 2 people in this chamber actually have that real world experience. And guess what, members? Those 2 members are against this bill passionately. Look, we can disagree, and we should disagree. That's how we get to the best policy. But we should also listen to people's lived experiences. We should also take that into account. And that's what Dr. Caraveo and I are up here trying to do. Because we are committed to coming down here to make sure that our patients receive the best care possible, the safest care possible. And this isn't us saying that we don't like PAs. I love the PAs I serve with. Truly love them, and we couldn't do the work that we do without them. But what's happening today, what we're seeing with this bill, is we are hearing and we are seeing how broken our rural health care system is. And it is. It's legitimately broken. But that issue is being hijacked so that a certain profession can get independent practice when that's not the solution. We know that the majority of PAs practicing in Colorado are in the urban area, are in the Metro Denver area. There is nothing in this bill that's showing us that we're going to see a gold rush of PAs to the rural areas. Now, is there work to be done? Is there valid concerns that were brought up from the PAs? Should we look at expansion of prescriptive authority? Should we look at increased telehealth? Should we look at doing everything we can to try to lift some of the burden off of these practitioners in the rural setting? Absolutely. And if you talk to people, I think that there is a commitment to do that. But again, like I said before, the proponents of this bill are bringing a butcher knife when we need to be bringing a scalpel to solve this problem. We heard the argument that the PA scope is tied to the physician scope. Exactly. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how the system is designed to be. Because that's how we protect the patient. That's how we make sure that everyone's able to get the care they can get so that the buck stops with the person that has the most training, those thousands of hours that Dr. Caraveo talked about. We've heard about consumer choice. And I'm for consumer choice too, but we have to have guardrails in place. We have to make sure that these consumers, in this case, these patients, are receiving safe care. And so there has to be those guardrails, and so we can't just lift guardrails, and I don't think anyone's advocating for that, but that's what we are advocating for. Members, I'm going to leave with this. There is no question, if you read this bill, absolutely no question, that this bill does not call for independent practice for our PAs. We do a great job at listening to our doctors and our clinicians and trusting them with our health, trusting them with our life. And those same doctors, those same clinicians have been outside of those doors saying this is not a good bill for Colorado. There is no reason why we shouldn't be listening to them and trusting them, because all they're trying to do is make sure that our patients can receive the best care possible. I'm bringing that real-world experience that we've heard up at this well. I have seen it firsthand. I am down here with no vested interest other than trying to make sure our patients receive that best care. I strongly, strongly, and passionately encourage a no vote.
Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And real lived experience has been talked about. I live in rural Colorado. I've been cared for by physician's assistants. I live it. We need them out in rural Colorado. Been talking down here about there's no supervision for a physician's assistant. A doctor has to sign off on everything they do. So I think this is a good bill to help fill the gap in rural Colorado until we can homegrown some docs and get them to practice out in rural Colorado. But until then, I'm 100% behind this bill.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to come down here again and once again renew my opposition for this bill. As we've talked about real lived experiences, I love our PAs that we have. This is not about how much we love our PAs or how much we hate our doctors. What it is it's about putting the PAs on the same level as the doctor. And I think that is of concern. And it's about changing the liability where we have a situation where the PA should be fully responsible if they're going to be moved up to the same level as the doctor for the exact same medical malpractice that the doctor should be responsible for. But then it has a chilling effect on people going to medical school, as Representative Dr. Caraveo pointed out. We need more doctors in rural Colorado. I can get PAs to come to Delta. We can get them in Montrose, we can get them in Grand Junction. But we're struggling to get doctors. And what this bill says is you might as well go to PA school, because PA school costs a fraction of what medical school would cost. The average person leaving medical school has over $220,000 worth of student loans. The average person leaving PA school, maybe $100,000, and that's if they maxed out. Nurse practitioner would be somewhere around that $20,000 figure. So it's important to understand that element. The other element is this will drive up costs, because a PA, and studies show this, is more likely to have the diagnostic procedures done, so more x-rays, more MRIs, than a doctor would. And that's based on experience. That's based on what a doctor has seen through thousands and thousands of hours of training. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but when you engage in more diagnostics, you engage in more transfers, you engage in more specialists being involved, certainly apprehension to prescribing at certain times, all this has the ability to drive up costs that a doctor has that larger, deeper experience to avoid. I just want to leave members with this final message that rural Colorado is already struggling. Colorado is already becoming an unaffordable place to live. And right now there is a war on rural Colorado. And with the comments that were made earlier that this will allow more PAs to go to rural Colorado, my concern is we're going to replace doctors with PAs, and that we're going to use telemedicine for this doctor to maybe oversee until they're independent. And then we have clinics of nothing but PAs in rural Colorado, which means we are now creating a tiered class. And as my colleague Representative Herod pointed out, the same thing can happen in Denver too. when we're talking minorities, when we're talking Coloradans who may be on Medicaid? Shouldn't they be able to have access to a doctor too? Members, I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Lontine and Will.
You go first, Perry.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been a lively debate, and I appreciate everyone speaking on this. I'm not going to hash over everything we've talked about. You know, my colleague Representative Soper just talking about sending PAs out to rural Colorado, and there's been discussion about, you know, is any kind of medical care better than, you know, having a doctor? I will say yes. In rural Colorado, any type of medical care is a good thing, okay? And I also want to point out that I can tell you that lived experience and life, okay? So we're talking about a PA that's got 25 years experience, right? Is that PA as good as a doctor that just came out of residency? I say probably better maybe, right? So it's from lived experience. So we're splitting hairs on this stuff. There's PAs out there that are very capable. They're not saying they're doctors. They're not hanging out their own shingles. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on this bill. And I got on this bill because I think it does help rural Colorado. And I haven't been convinced today that it doesn't help rural Colorado. It's a turf war. I think you heard today it's a turf war. Okay, so be it. We can fight the turf wars, but let's try to get the medical care out to Coloradans that need it. So I would ask for an aye vote on this.
Representative Lontine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I was just here. And again, I, don't want to pit provider against provider, but I feel like that's what our opposition is forcing us into a corner of. Again, I'd like to be clear, PAs are not holding themselves out to be the equivalent of a doctor. That is just not the case. They have to be clear about their role with a patient. They are a PA. When you get scheduled with a PA, you're told you're seeing a PA. So there's no, I'm not a doctor, but you may think I am, happening. That's just not the case. And even though a patient might not see a doctor in front of them, that PA is still having to consult with that doctor. That's the way they are trained. It is the model of their practice, and it is what they want to do. They are not holding themselves out as an independent practitioner. I don't know how much more we can say that would change the minds of those whose minds are already made up, but for those of you who are still thinking about that, I would put out there that you consider that that is the case. They are not asking to be a doctor. They don't want to be called a doctor. And for whatever reason, maybe they realized they couldn't afford to go to medical school but still wanted to help patients. That's valid. Maybe Representative Titone talked about her brother who is a PA in Arizona, and he just didn't want the responsibility of it. That's valid too. That doesn't mean his care is substandard. It just means that he wants to do this very specific thing and do it well. Apparently he does, because he's training doctors in the things that he does well. And so I just want to leave you all with the reality that PAs are struggling to find work. They are behind all the other level of practitioners at their level, mid-level practitioners in hiring because of the bureaucracy of it. They're not asking to be held any less accountable. They have to carry the same medical malpractice insurance as a doctor does. I don't think many folks realize that. Representative Cutter carried that bill to require that. So that was recently done. And so they're not in a place where they will not be held accountable if they make mistakes. They will. They just want to be a part of the team. And this isn't just rural. This is here in Denver that I represent, areas where we need more providers. And so I would ask that you consider that I believe this is a turf war, and I don't think we need to have a winner or loser situation. I think there's enough work for all of us, or all of them. I'm not a provider. I think you all know that. But if you need a Band-Aid, I can put that on. So, thank you, and I ask for an aye vote on House Bill 1095.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1095? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1095. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. House Bill 1095 passes. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 45.
Senate Bill 45 by Senator Lee, also Representative Byrd, concerning modifications to the laws governing public benefit corporations.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 045.
To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, members, this bill relates to public benefit corporations. And just by way of background, public benefit corporations are for-profit corporations that are intended to produce a public benefit or public benefits and to operate in a responsible and sustainable manner. It must be managed in a manner that balances the shareholders' pecuniary interests, the best interest of those materially affected by the corporation's conduct, and the public benefit identified in its articles of incorporation. PBCs must identify one or more specific public benefits as their statement of purpose in their charters. This embeds a PBC's mission into its founding documents. Colorado's current law is modeled on similar Delaware legislation, and the bill we have before us is based upon 2020 changes that Delaware made to its law, which will keep us at parity with how Delaware manages these same types of corporations and make them easier to use in Colorado. Importantly, these changes will benefit our state by attracting more companies whose mission is focused on achieving a public benefit. The changes, again, that we are seeing before us today have received the unanimous approval of the Executive Council of the Colorado Bar Association Business Law Section and the Colorado Bar Association Legislative Policy Committee. I ask for your aye vote.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 45. Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 45. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 45 passes. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 59.
Want to do it the same way?
Senate Bill 59 by Senator Holbert, also Representatives Hooton and Ransom, concerning limitations regarding a proxy that a unit owner in a common interest community obtains from another unit owner in the common interest community to vote on behalf of the other unit owner at a meeting of the Unit Owners Association.
Representative Hooton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I move Senate Bill 059.
To the bill. Representative Hooton.
Members, in some HOAs, a few people have obtained long-term or even permanent proxy vote status from other members of that HOA, which gives those few residents total control of that covenant control community. In some cases, there is no way for another member to be elected to the HOA board. When a small group of people hold long-term or even permanent control of a covenant community, in our opinion, it runs contrary to the concept of such a community of owners. So with this bill, we are restricting the length of time a member of a community can hold on to someone else's proxy to 11 months. And if they would like to renew the possession of that proxy, then there is a formal arrangement between the original owner and the proxy holder in order to make that happen. Thank you.
Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill passed the Senate unanimously. It also passed unanimously in our Transportation and Local Government Committee here in the House earlier this week. And just so that you know, make sure you look at the re-engrossed version of the bill. It was amended extensively in the Senate after quite a lot of stakeholding, because the original version of the bill had a lot more in it, but after extensive stakeholding, it truly was brought to a position that everybody could agree to what we are asking here in the bill. So I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 59? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 59. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes still have it. Senate Bill 59 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move the committee rise and report.
Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come to order. Mr. Shebo, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1018 as amended, 1082 as amended, 1095 as amended, 1266 passed on second reading, order engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 45, Senate Bill 59 passed on second reading or revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Shebo. Representative Roberts. Thank you. There are no amendments on the desk. The question before us is adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Shebo, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Those of you on the board, let's go and see how you vote. Representative Titone.
Yes.
Representative Rich?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say how you voted. So Representative Rich votes no. And I'm going to go back to Representative Titone. How do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Titone votes yes. Representative Van Winkle, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Van Winkle votes no. Representative Williams, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Williams votes no. Representative Exum, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Exum votes yes, and Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Representative Valdez D. votes yes. No one else is there? Oh. All right. I've never had to vote from up here, and I didn't know I could. So, all right. Mr. Shebo, please close the machine. And with that, the motion passes to approve the report of the Committee of the Whole, 38 ayes and 23 noes, and 4 excused. Madam, announcements and introductions. Representative Mullica.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. We have a tribute and would like to be read at length, please.
Thank you. Mr. Shebo.
State of Colorado. The House of Representatives convened in the 73rd General Assembly hereby commemorates March as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. The Colorado House of Representatives reaffirms the Federal Department of Health and Human Services recognition since 2016 as, of March as National Bleeding Disorders Month. This recognition formalizes and expands upon the designation that began 36 years ago, when President Ronald Reagan recognized March 1986 as Hemophilia Awareness Month. Bleeding disorders affect more than 1,000 Coloradans and can lead to significant morbidity and even be fatal if not treated effectively. This designation will generate greater awareness and understanding of not only hemophilia, but all inheritable blood disorders, including von Willebrand disease, which alone impacts an estimated 1% of the U.S. population, or more than 3.2 million individuals. Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month will foster a great sense of community and shared purpose among individuals with all inheritable bleeding disorders, as well as elevate awareness of and engagement in the inheritable bleeding disorders journey by the public, enabling the prevention of illness, unnecessary procedures, and disability. The Colorado House of Representatives pauses in its deliberations to proudly commemorate March as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month in the state of Colorado. On request of Representative Kyle Mullica, given this 4th day of March 2022, State Capitol, Denver, signed Alec Garnett, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Representative Mullica.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, I'll be brief. We know that these disorders affect thousands of families in our state, and want to welcome some of those families here today. They're not in the chamber. I think they are visiting with some other legislators at this point, but it's definitely important that these disorders stay on our radar because they have a big impact on families and sometimes don't have the best outcomes. And so super excited that we were able to bring that today, and just want to thank all those families for advocating for themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mullica. Any other announcements? If not, Madam Majority, wait, there is one or two. First one down. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. So, you all should have received one of these from the House Judiciary Committee. This is actually inspired by a book known as Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. It's a great book on grammar. And in the back of that book, there are particular stickers that one can use in order to go around town and fix grammar issues. And I'll just tell you a fun story. When I went to get some fingerprints done in order to tutor at a school, I went to the local police station and I rang the bell, and there's that one-way mirror and nobody answered. And so I was sitting there and I was reading this sign. I was like, this is horrible grammar. So I rang the bell again and still nobody answered. And so I picked up a pen and I was just about to fix some of the grammar on this sign, and all of a sudden there was someone there. And they were like, wait, hold on, what are you doing? And I thought about it afterwards. I thought, I could have been charged with defacing public property, but really the issue was their own defacement of our English language. Anyways, as it says on here, the Judiciary Committee is known for our robust grammatical decisions, and I think it's only fitting that we note that grammar saves lives, and so be sure to take your pen. And while I don't encourage you to deface public property, you may want to point out to people where their grammar needs a little bit of improvement. And I will just conclude my remarks. I know that the Chair Judiciary has something also to add, but I will just say, regardless of your grammar skills, you are loved and amazing and worthy and adored, and I can't wait to see you again soon.
Thank you, Representative Luck, and thanks for your remarks. It just gives us the idea that grammar police can be a real thing. So, Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. And members, yes, you've hopefully seen that little reminder about the importance of the small things, which I did encourage Rep. Luck to distribute. I've joked to some folks here that the House Judiciary is the strict scrutiny committee. That is a lawyer joke, I'm sorry. We have gone to a new level in the last couple of weeks. We have dealt with dangerously dangling modifiers, peregrinating prepositional phrases, duplicated definite articles, and confounding coordinating conjunctions even. Rep. Luck and also Rep. Woodrow have been particularly attentive to these semiotic subterfuges and others, and in response to all of these, the scalpel of skepticism and even the axe of amendment have fallen on some of these grammatical monstrosities, with the result that better text has come to us here with the Committee of the Whole. More seriously, long debate this morning, long week. This is what the committee process is supposed to do, is catch these things. Having myself been the object or perhaps victim of that process this week with a bill that I had, it's really how committees are supposed to work. I appreciate the detail and attention that members of the committee, both sides, bring to the work that we do. Some improvements have been made to bills. We're all here for a couple of years. We may think that we know what things mean, but we're laying down the law for a long time, and we need to achieve clarity in what we pay forward to the future. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, Representative. What? So, Rhoda, I was going to call you by your first name.
Representative Emily Works too, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. The Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services Committee will meet 10 minutes after adjournment to hear Senate Bill 52, House Bill 1231, House Bill 1209, Senate Bill 102, and House Bill 1221.
Thank you. Other announcements? Seeing none, Madam Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
So moved. Seeing no objection, we're in recess.